My British Empire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51. Noisy. Pulled by the carriage, Edward slowly passed the children half kneeling on the grass, his face full of emotion, and the children were dazzled by the luxury carriage that boldly looked up at the passing in front of them. Many of them have never even seen gold in their lives, let alone a carriage made of a lot of gold. When Jack saw Edward for the first time, he was attracted by the golden carriage under him. His round eyes could no longer be shaken off, and he followed the carriage straight forward. He would not be overwhelmed until Edward was far away. "Come, hey, Alan. Have you seen His Majesty's gold carriage?" Jack asked in a low voice to his little friend Alan. His little face was flushed, and he looked a little excited. "I saw it. I heard that there is only one carriage like this in the whole of England, and none of the lords. It belongs to Our Majesty the King." Alan's face was also shining apple-colored because of excitement, and even his ears turned pale. "It's bright red." Alan spoke in such a low voice that Jack couldn't hear it unless he listened carefully. Alan moved his position to the left, looking around, for fear that the guards following the carriage would find out. His lips moved slightly, looking like an old hand. "Jack, keep your voice down," Alan reminded. "Understood. But, Alan, when will the two of us have our own carriage?" Jack seemed afraid that Alan would say that he didn't know how to brag, and then explained, "I mean ordinary carriages, not this kind of gold carriage." After listening to Jack's words, Alan, who always liked to think, immediately remembered the rumors he had heard from others, thought about it carefully, and finally spoke. "Jack, I heard that His Majesty the King has set up an organization called Dark Blade. As long as you make contributions, you can become a real knight. Is this true?" "Alan," Jack asked in disbelief. "It should be true. Why don't we talk to the coach? Let's go together." "Yes. We will definitely become knights," Jack said loudly, full of confidence. "Keep your voice down. You want to die." Alan looked at Jack helplessly, speechless on his face. "Hey, Alan. Is what you said true? I want to add one too," a child in the same dormitory said courageously. "Me too. Count me in." "And me." After a while, various voices sounded around Jack. Edward walked ahead in a carriage, and spent the journey alone with emotion, while the mentality of the knights behind him was quite different from his. The appearance of Baron Smith riding and leading a horse caused the collective ridicule of the guards, and he simply followed Edward alone, which was quite a pleasure. Although they are all little kids, there are at least 2,000 people. This is the most prestigious one since the suppression of the rebellion, and it is probably the last time that Iron Shield will enjoy this glory. Baron Smith thought silently in his heart, and felt a little lost. He couldn't help looking at his old horse, Iron Shield, who was once galloping on the battlefield. The mood of Alexander and other knights was very happy. In the era of peace, these guards rarely had the opportunity to see so many people neatly gathered together. What a great performance opportunity this is. I must let my mighty and extraordinary figure be imprinted in the minds of those children, and my Huawei and extraordinary appearance will definitely be passed down. So, all the knights dressed themselves up in fancy dresses, rode on the horses with their heads held high, showing their charming smiles, and walked forward confidently. In fact, the children are all driven by Edward's golden coach, and the oddly named Baron Smith. Of course, there is also the Alexander Knight, who has been handsome since childhood. Knight Alexander was already very handsome, and with his makeup, he was almost the most beautiful man in England. It was hard not to attract people's attention at this time in London. Edward Seymour, Duke of Somerset, was sitting as a minister on the Regency Council. In the meantime, his brows were frowned into a hill, and he looked at the ministers who were talking in front of him. "I agree with His Excellency the Duke's proposal. Since the implementation of the act of dissolving the small auditorium, the country's finances have never been more abundant." Earl Boswell gave an impassioned speech, exhausting all his strength. The Earl of Southampton can testify that there is still a smear of saliva on his face. Not only has the loan owed by the late king been repaid, but there is still a lot of surplus, enough for us to fight a war. "But, my Lord Earl of Boswell, don't you think that the savages of Scotland will not be caught without a fight? The expedition to Scotland during the King's time brought huge casualties to our boys in England, and it has not healed until now." The Earl of Wellington, who had always supported the Duke of Somerset, turned his gun and opposed Duke Edward's opinion. "Besides, we have no reason to fight the northern man, and the French will not turn a blind eye." The Earl of Wellington, as one of the only 9 earls remaining in England, has a strong prestige in the government and parliament. In fact, one of the reasons for the current scarcity of nobles in England has a lot to do with Henry VIII. When Henry VIII came to the throne, there were still 20 dukes, marquis, and earls in England. After his death, there were only 1 duke and 9 earls, and the senior titles were reduced by half. To give an example, in 1489, he agreed to be made Earl of Nottingham, Marquis of Berkeley, but he had an additional condition that he could not pass the title of Marquis of Berkeley to his brother. As a result, after the death of the Marquis of Nottingham, the Earl and Marquis titles were left unoccupied at the same time, and these 2 titles were left vacant there. Moreover, Henry VIII also deprived the rebels of their property and titles, prohibited the nobles from raising soldiers, prohibited the nobles from building new castles, and prohibited the nobles from storing new weapons, etc. Strictly restricting the growth of local nobles. Henry VIII deprived 12 nobles of their titles, and Elizabeth deprived 6 nobles of their titles. By the end of the Tudor dynasty, there was not a single duke in England, so I think the Duke's proposal should be put on hold for a while. I disagree with the Earl of Wellington's opinion. I think the Duke's decision is very wise. I and others have been entrusted by the late King to jointly govern the Kingdom of England for nearly half a year, and Scotland's harassment has never stopped. Earl Boswell did not give up his support, but also wanted to rouse the collective honor of the ministers. The nobles still valued the aspect of being beaten. I think. The ministers talked and expressed their opinions one after another, and the whole meeting became a mess. Only the Earl of Walkery sat there as usual, looking at the quarreling ministers with a smile, without saying a word. "Okay, gentlemen. Let's talk about this tomorrow." Duke Edward said this, turned around and walked out of the meeting room. "Thanks, book friend. 160,328,233,758,538, Jinhao Eugen, Zuwen, Mingshi Zinfeng, Prussian nobleman, IP 001736, book friend. 1,887,429,393, 56-legged brother Mao, silent to Fei, book friend. 160,520,113,042,017, Minhang Dream Talk, Legolas Fencing authors, Lancaster Coup, Shell, Best Man, everyone's vote support. Chapter 52 Private Conversation. Gentlemen, let's talk about it tomorrow. The Earl of Warwick also stood up, bowing and apologizing to the ministers who were talking a lot. He swaggered open the door of the conference room and walked out. Then Bishop Thomas also stood up tremblingly, bowed to the ministers, and slowly walked out of the conference room without waiting for everyone to return the salute. "Okay, gentlemen, let's break up." Duke Holden also got up, said in his hoarse voice, and beat the floor with his crutches, reminding the stunned ministers. Then the Earl of Southampton and Baron Seymour also left the meeting room, and the rest of the people looked around, and all got up and left their seats. Coincidentally, it was the Earl of Wellington and the Earl of Boswell who left last. The two quarreled at the meeting, and they talked and laughed like friends after the meeting. "Dear Earl Wellington, I wish you a happy life today." Earl Boswell smiled happily, as if proving that there was no conflict between the two, and shook hands with him. "You too, Earl Boswell. I wish you a happy day." Earl Wellington wished friendly. His voice was very sincere. Then the two boarded their own carriages, and while the horses were galloping, the two traveled farther and farther until they couldn't see the figure of the person opposite them. Earl Boswell finally couldn't hold back as the carriage was driving. He raised the corners of his mouth, gasped for air, and kept beating the doors and windows of the carriage with both hands, making a bang sound. The groom held the mentality that he had nothing to do with himself, and there was no look of surprise on his face, and he was still driving the carriage in his hand. "Seriously, damn Edward Wellington, isn't it just that his nephew is a general in the army? There is no one who is immortal in a war in the world. What are you afraid of?" Earl Boswell cursed bitterly, the eyebrows on his face they all shrunk into a ball, which shows how bad his mood is. Can he not be in a bad mood? If the war against Scotland could start this time, his arsenal would have at least an order for 5,000 matchlock guns, which would bring him tens of thousands of pounds in income. This is higher than the normal 5-year income of the factory. What was supposed to be a sure thing was interrupted by Earl Wellington, and the business almost went bankrupt. How could he be relieved? Eve, turn around and go to the Duke's mansion of Somerset first. The Earl suddenly remembered the Duke's mansion not far from here, and quickly ordered the middle-aged groom who was driving. "Yes, Your Excellency." Eve has always been taciturn, and he responded bluntly, and there was no follow-up, and he slowly drove the carriage to divert to the Duke's mansion. Whoa. Lord Earl. The Duke's mansion is here. As a groom, Eve is qualified, and within a short while, Earl Boswell was smoothly delivered to the door of the Duke's mansion. Understood. Help me down first. The Earl's voice was very calm. Evidently, the journey had transformed the Earl's mood into a normal state of mind. Eve consciously took an ottoman, placed it next to the carriage, and helped the fat Earl down. Afterwards, he trotted to the gate of the Duke's mansion, and saluted the waiter who was guarding the gate. After all, the power of the Duke was still very hot in England, and there was an endless stream of nobles and businessmen who came to see him. Hello. I am the servant of the Earl of Boswell, and my Lord Earl is here to visit His Excellency the Duke, Eve said politely to the young servant, and behaved very politely. Okay. I'm going to report right now. Please wait a moment. With the Earl, when he was young, the waiter glanced at the middle-aged man in front of him, and then glanced at the distance. A rich man in aristocratic costumes was waiting beside the gorgeous carriage, looking at this place unhurriedly. Soon, Duke Edward got the news of Earl Boswell's arrival, and hurried to the gate to greet his important supporter in person. The figure of Duke Edward appeared at the door of the Duke's mansion. After seeing it, Earl Boswell, who was not far away, rushed to meet him. Earl Boswell. My friend. Welcome. Duke Edward's tone was very enthusiastic, the corners of his mouth parted, and he shook the Earl's hand with a smile. I'm glad to meet you too. Dear Your Excellency the Duke. The Earl said enthusiastically, the eyebrows under his forehead also raised. Obviously he liked the Duke's polite approach. Then, the two came to the study together, and there were several servants at the door who were strictly guarding it. It was obvious that the Duke also knew that there must be something wrong with the arrival of the Earl of Boswell. The two chatted for a while about other things to warm up the atmosphere. When the time came, the Earl decided to try his attitude, so he said slowly, My Lord Duke. I am shocked that the Earl of Wellington opposed your proposal today. I know the Earl of Wellington's thoughts. He has no heirs at present, and only his nephew is the heir, and his nephew can't make any mistakes. Duke Edward glanced at Earl Boswell, who was full of consideration for him, blinked, and then said unhurriedly, But you can't give up the expedition to Scotland for his nephew. This is the most important military operation for us to reform the Holy Church. At present, after Edward Seymour's reform in the first half of 1547, the reform of the whole of England has reached a bottleneck, that is to say, it has reached the deep water area. However, relying on Edward's current prestige, it is no longer possible to deepen the reform, and external forces must be used to help him. And Edward and his assistants agreed that only a hearty victory can boost Edward's prestige and thus promote the process of religious reform in England. There are too many such examples in history, such as the Wang Anshi reform that we are familiar with. After several years of reform, Wang Anshi decided to let the war test the benefits of the reform, so as to convince the domestic opposition forces. Therefore, in the 6th year of Xining, 1073, in the northern Song dynasty, under the command of Wang Anshi, Wang Shao, the envoy of Songzai Road, led an army to attack Tubo, recovered 5 prefectures including He, Tao, and Min, expanded more than 2,000 miles of land, and pacified the Kayang people. 300,000 tents. This was an unprecedented military victory in the northern Song dynasty, and it also established a favorable front for attacking the Zixia area. Unfortunately, only a few years after Song Shenzong's death, in the 8th year of Yuanfeng, 1085, when Song Zhezhen came to the throne, Empress Dowager Gao listened to the government behind a curtain, appointed Sima Guang as prime minister, and almost all the new laws were abolished. Even the achievements of Wang Anshi's period of expanding the land for thousands of miles were all returned to Zixia by the glorious image of Master Sima Guang in history, and the achievements of the reform were almost destroyed. Hearing this, Duke Edward couldn't help feeling turmoil in his heart. Regarding his political ideal of reforming the Holy Church, he must complete it. Don't worry, my Lord Earl. I will let the bill pass. Your factory is ready to start. Edward's words ignited Earl Boswell's heart, and he almost thought of his prosperous, relaxed and happy life next year. As for the little thought that was pointed out by Duke Edward, Earl Boswell had already hidden it deeply in his heart. After all, the proud self-esteem of the nobleman could not bear to expose the face of the nobleman in person. Thanks to NRPHF5, Express Zinfeng, who wants to know, IP 001735, Prussian aristocrat, Hell Sky number 1, Guis, Cheyenne Sword, Aircraft, Q Tang Heng, Silent Defei, Min Hang Menghua, everyone's big support. The recent internship is so hard. Please count the votes to comfort me. Chapter 53. With Duke Edward's promise, Earl Boswell had an unconcealable smile on his face, and was sent back to the carriage step by step by Duke Edward. After boarding the carriage, the Earl immediately restrained his smile, and his face suddenly became gloomy. "Eve, go home." The Earl's voice came out of the carriage, and Eve, who was waiting for orders, immediately whipped the horses, and the whole carriage started to move quickly again. The next day, Duke Edward left the Duke's mansion in a well-dressed suit. He did not go to the former supporter and current opponent, the Earl of Wellington's mansion. Instead, let the coachman drive the carriage to the Earl of Warwick's mansion. Along the way, Duke Edward struggled unceasingly. It was an embarrassing thing for the face-saving Duke Edward to ask his old opponent for help. However, the situation in the conference room yesterday was still vivid. Two of his original supporters opposed his conquest of Scotland. There are also 3 opponents in Earl Vauquery's team. If he cooperates with those neutral people, his proposal is likely to be dismissed, which is a fatal blow to his prestige. So even though Duke Edward was embarrassed, he still didn't tell the coachman to turn around, so he slowly arrived at the Earl of Warwick's mansion. Duke Edward returned to his normal state of mind, and with the help of the coachman, he arrived at the gate of the Earl's mansion. The sharp-eyed doorman saw the family emblem of the Seymour family on the carriage, and hurried back to the mansion to report. This time it was the Earl of Warwick who came to the gate in person and greeted His Excellency the Duke with a smile. "It's God's blessing that His Excellency the Duke actually came to me. You're welcome. Dear sir, I'm also here on business." Duke Edward shook his head and said with a wry smile, "Really? His Excellency Duke Edward, who has been busy with everything, must have something important to come in person." Earl of Warwick said seriously in front of Duke Edward. "Then let's go to the study to discuss." "My Lord Duke." Subsequently, the Duke of Edward and the Earl of Warwick came to his study. Edward looked at it carefully, and said that it was a study room. In fact, there were not many books, at most a dozen books, and some of them were wrinkled from reading. "Mr. Earl, there are still many books in my Duke's mansion, and there are even books handed down from Rome describing that ancient Oriental country." Duke Edward couldn't help being very proud. In terms of knowledge, he still crushed the Earl of Warwick, and his fragile self-esteem suddenly became much stronger. "My Lord Duke, it is enough for a soldier like me to read a few books. My life is very leisurely, and I don't have to deal with the big and small things in England like you." "You can't say that. The respectable Earl of Warwick must be a man of profound knowledge. This is the tacit fact of all nobles." Edward pretended not to understand the Earl's complaint, and praised the Earl solemnly, with an expression of admiration on his face. "My Lord Duke, stop talking nonsense. I am a soldier. If you have something to say, just speak up." Earl Vauquery said impatiently, matching his bearded face was indeed in line with the temper that a soldier should have. A pure soldier will become an earl from a low-level nobleman. "You have underestimated the wisdom of the king." Cunning old fox. Duke Edward couldn't help sneering in his heart. He didn't believe it at all, but he still had a calm expression on his face. "Since you said that, let's speak frankly and openly. You can see the results of yesterday's conference room clearly. The ministers who opposed it accounted for half of the entire committee. If you add those who opposed the Holy Church reform led by the Duke of Houghton, our Holy Church reform will be overturned." Duke Edward understood that the Earl of Warwick, like himself, was a supporter of the reform of the Holy Church, and he would certainly not stand by and watch the results of the reform go to waste. "My Lord Duke, they seem to be objecting to your plan to send troops to Scotland." The Earl smiled unkindly, then looked at Duke Edward, as if waiting for his explanation. "Your Excellency, Minister, this time they have the opportunity to cooperate once, and there is no guarantee that they will not cooperate next time. We cannot let them continue like this." Duke Edward's words aroused a little worry in Earl Warwick's heart, and a pensive look appeared on the Earl's face. Duke Edward knew that the Earl of Warwick could not be persuaded to help him by relying on common beliefs alone, so he could only persuade him by profit. "I can make you the general and deputy chief of the expedition to Scotland. I will propose this appointment after the war proposal is passed." After Duke Edward said this, he regretted deeply in his heart. After all, if this expedition is successful, not only his prestige will definitely increase, and if the Earl of Warwick is added, the prestige bonus that belongs to him will definitely be greatly reduced. No matter how unwilling he is, Duke Edward cannot take back what he has said, especially in such a serious discussion occasion. "Okay, my dear Duke, I will make a decision that truly belongs to the interests of England at tomorrow's meeting." After thinking about it, the Earl decided to cooperate with Duke Edward's proposal to continue the reform of the Holy Church. "Especially if someone who has nothing to do with me can still get a share of the benefits, then it will be even more irrelevant." As a result, the atmosphere in the whole room suddenly became harmonious, and the two long-standing rivals began to chat happily. The unknowing people thought it was a reunion of friends who had met for many years when they saw it. The happy time is always short. In London in this summer, there is still a slight breeze at night, which makes people not only feel a little bit of coolness, especially for the servants who are exposed to the sun during the day. This is a cool time. The shy moon had already risen into the sky, shining soft moonlight. Even though His Excellency the Duke was completely covered by the bright moonlight, His Excellency the Duke, who had just walked out of the study, already felt a chill. Tonight's result is one gain and one loss. My proposal is expected to be passed, but my political enemy, the Earl of Vokery, is expected to continue to grow. I really don't know whether it is a good thing or a bad thing. Your Excellency the Duke couldn't help thinking the Earl of Warwick personally sent Earl Edward to the carriage, and the joyful scene between the host and the guest was immediately deeply imprinted in the minds of the servants present. When he got into the carriage, Duke Edward was still as indifferent as before, and he was still so personable. Go to the Earl of Wellington's mansion. Duke Edward's voice interrupted the groom's next movements, and it was particularly loud in the silent night thanks to LP00175, Lancaster coup, the Prussian nobleman, and the three big supporters. This is for Minhang Menghuda, Prussian nobles, and Rhyme everyone who rewarded Jiajeng. I am doing an internship recently, and Jiajeng is a bit difficult. Forgive me. Chapter 54. A feeling of being tricked. Early the next morning, Earl Boswell heard that the Duke of Somerset had visited the Earl of Warwick the night before last night. His heart was always up and down, for fear that his fortune would be interrupted. Hearing this news, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. It seems that my factory is still stepping up its recruitment efforts, and next year will definitely be a bumper year of free. Give me another bowl of barley porridge. Earl Boswell's appetite increased in the morning when he heard the news. Yes, my master. The pretty maid on the side lowered her head and answered. After breakfast, Earl Boswell came to the Palace of Westminster in a carriage, which is not only the seat of the House of Lords and House of Commons, but also the meeting place of the Regency Council. Coincidentally, as soon as he got off the carriage, the Earl saw the Earl of Wellington startle the carriage with the support of the groom, and a smile quickly appeared on his face, which was very sincere. He had already anticipated today's result, so for Earl Wellington, there was no conflict of interest, and he also had the intention of repairing it. Oh, dear Earl of Wellington, it's a pleasure to see you. The Earl's chubby body embraced the same body of the Earl of Wellington, which looked particularly funny. Oh, no, Monsieur Count. How flattered I am by your enthusiasm. Upon hearing this, Earl Boswell quickly let go of the pale Earl Wellington. On the countenance of Earl Wellington's frightened expression, there was still a trace of fear left. Obviously he was terribly frightened by Earl Boswell. My Count, you are so warm, aren't I making up for the loss of love between the two of us yesterday? Earl Boswell said sincerely, looking particularly aggrieved. Okay. Let's go in first. The meeting is more important. Earl Wellington still couldn't bear the disgusting tone of the Earl, and hastily resorted to a plan to escape. Seeing Earl Wellington's rabbit-like pace, he couldn't help shaking his head and smiling bitterly, and walked towards the conference room with strides. After the Earl took his own seat, the ministers arrived one after another. Duke Edward stood on the main seat, patted the table, and signaled the ministers to be quiet. Gentlemen, let's continue yesterday's topic today. Do you want to fight those barbarians in the north? After the Duke finished speaking, he immediately sat down and watched the ministers say nothing. Ministers, look at me, I look at you. Even the Earl of Boswell and the Earl of Wellington, who had a fierce quarrel yesterday, were quiet. That's why the entire conference room was extremely quiet, and the grooms outside the window could be vaguely yelled, and if you listened carefully, you could clearly hear the chirping of the horses. Seeing the ministers looking at each other without saying a word, Earl Boswell knew that he was going to be a leader, otherwise the meeting would be a little suspended. Your Excellency, ministers, I still think the Duke Edward's proposal is very good. I agree with his proposal. After saying this, the Earl sat down, without the scorching feeling from yesterday. Immediately afterwards, the ministers turned their attention to Earl Wellington to see if he could stick to his idea. After all, they heard that Duke Edward had visited him last night. Earl Wellington turned his head and looked at Earl Boswell in his seat. After thinking about it, everyone's eyes focused on him. Although he was a little slapped in the face and depressed for a while, he finally decided to speak. Good day, gentlemen. After careful consideration last night, I have decided to overturn my opinion, and I support the proposal of the Duke of Somerset. After speaking, he seemed to have heard the discussions of the ministers. Even though he was already thick-skinned, Mr. Earl still felt a little embarrassed. Earl Wellington's words were like dropping a bomb on the calm water, causing an uproar. The ministers did not expect that the Earl, who was against the vanguard yesterday, would take a 360-degree turn today and suddenly become a supporter of the Duke, but it's normal to think about it. After all, he has always been a supporter of the Duke before, but he turned against it because of his interests, and now he has returned to his original position because of his interests immediately afterwards. The Earl of Warwick, who had been calmly observing, just stood up and attracted everyone's attention. Only Duke Edward looked confident. Gentlemen, the Scots' aggression against us is obvious to all, and this group of barbarians will not know the power of England unless they teach them a lesson. But the expedition to Scotland will bring a heavy burden to the finances that have just improved. This is really a difficult choice. I respect your choices. After talking nonsense, the Earl sat down again, as if nothing happened, and watched the minister's performance with great interest. Although the Earl did not express his opinion, but those who can enter the Regency Council are all good people, so how could they not understand? Bishop Thomas closed his eyes and meditated, and suddenly opened his eyes. The cloudy eyes seemed to be thinking about something, and then closed his eyes again, as if nothing had happened. After taking more than a month of marriage leave, Baron Thomas was finally able to attend the Regency Council. As the Minister of the Navy and the Minister of Order entrusted by Henry VIII, he was already a member of the Regency Council. He was very satisfied with the result of his brother's loss yesterday, but it didn't last long, and his mood began to turn bad again. Then, as expected, in the next vote, Duke Edward passed with 9 votes in favor and 7 votes against, and then it can be submitted to Edward for approval. Duke Edward finally showed a smug smile, and Earl Boswell also smiled heartily. Dear gentlemen, next, it is time to discuss who will lead the expeditionary force, and I will lead the boys from England to go on an expedition against the savages of Scotland, and I propose, His Excellency the Duke paused for a while, whetting the appetite of the ministers, among whom the Earl of Warwick was most concerned. Looking at the expectant crowd, Duke Edward finally went on to say, the Earl of Warwick will be the Deputy Marshal, in charge of logistics, and while I was away in London, Lord Bishop Thomas presided over the daily affairs of the Regency Council. And, what? The Earl of Warwick's mouth suddenly opened wide, interrupting His Excellency the Duke's speech. Obviously, this incident shocked him too much, and he was so shocked that he made a sound. I'm sorry, gentlemen. I'm not feeling well, I'm going back first. The Earl of Warwick restrained his emotions, bowed to the many ministers, and then gave Duke Edward a hard look. Everyone could see that the Earl of Warwick was very angry, and it was still related to his appointment thanks to Gus, best man, Q Tunghen, Xiao Bei veteran, Legolas Windrunner, Dragon Horse Inheritance, who specializes in eating books, 56 Leg Mao brother, Silent to Fei, Prussian nobleman, rest assured 2 copies, thank you for your support. I am very grateful to the speechless Fei for his great reward. No more updates today, recent internship, too busy. By the way, begging for a recommendation ticket. Everyone beat me to death with votes. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55 Credentials from England. Not only did Duke Edward fully accept the Earl of Warwick's gaze, but after he left, he continued to talk as if he hadn't noticed it. The Earl of Warwick is going back because he is unwell. Let's make some arrangements. Looking at the eloquent Duke Edward, the Earl of Wellington couldn't help but think of their conversation last night in the living room. There are 2 chairs, a table, and 2 cups of hot green tea on the table. Duke Edward and the Earl of Wellington sat face to face. His Excellency the Duke had already explained his interests to him, but he was still reluctant to let his only heir take part in the war. If something went wrong, the Earl of Wellington would be removed from his name. Seeing that Earl of Wellington was still so hesitant, a good idea suddenly came to Duke Edward's mind. Dear Mr. Earl, I wonder if you intend to become a general. What does this mean? My Lord Duke. Earl Wellington couldn't figure out why he was involved because it was his nephew's business. You are a general now, and your nephew is just a small company commander. Isn't his action under your control? Edward could only point out his own thoughts, so that Earl Wellington could understand better. It's possible, but I have never commanded an army. Will the ministers agree? The Earl thought for a moment, and felt that not only could he keep his nephew, but he could also gain merit. Where could such a good thing be found? And I am more familiar with Scotland, you just need to follow my command. Duke Edward said in a big way, with a confident expression on his face. Duke Edward was ordered to sack Edinburgh in 1544, forcing it to sign a treaty. In fact, as an aristocrat who has been passed down for hundreds of years, the Earl didn't eat pork. Haven't we seen pigs run away? For the strength of the Duke of Somerset, the Earl still believes that he did not rely on nepotism as rumored outside. His Excellency the Duke served as Lord of the Navy in 1542, and in 1544 he led troops into Scotland and plundered Edinburgh, 1544. He fought against France at Boulogne in 1545 and achieved another brilliant victory. This happy day passed quickly. The Duke of Edward celebrated with a group of supporters in his mansion. The young and beautiful maids carried fine wine among the nobles, and the Duke's mansion became a sea of joy. As for the Earl of Warwick's mansion, the Earl was communicating with his buddies, and from time to time, his group of allied interests would curse Duke Edward. The passing maids hurried away, for fear of getting into any trouble. After all, for little people like them, they didn't care about death. I said, I can no longer trust Edward, the son of a low-ranking nobleman. A guy covered in mud is not worthy of trust. The Marquis of Dorset on the side said indignantly that for a hereditary nobleman like him, Edward Seymour, who relied on his nepotism, was the one who looked down on him the most, so he was the first to speak out. My Lord Marquis, you can't say that. Judging from the Duke Seymour's incident, we are not without gains. At least it can show that he has completely broken with us, and we will be enemies in the future. Sir Berengar Edmund carefully analyzed it from the side, and said something very reasonable regarding Sir Berengar's words. The Earl nodded involuntarily, a little bit to express his approval of the statement, and then nodded to signal him to continue. Although it is said that Duke Seymour has set us up, we can use it skillfully. Isn't the Earl in charge of logistics? We can hand over most of the purchases to the local nobles, so that although the Earl has no military exploits, he can still befriend the nobles. Sir Berengar was encouraged, so he couldn't help but continue to speak boldly, with the temperament of a strategist. After listening to Sir Berengar's words, and then looking at the Earl's expression, the Marquis of Dorset, who had a disdainful expression on his face, suddenly became brighter, with a sense of joy. Yes, that's it, Sir Berengar is right. For the Marquis of Dorset, grass is a good word, and it is also the foundation of his family's long-term standing. My Lord Earl, Sir Berengar is right, he thinks the same as me. Okay. That's it. You guys go back first. Hearing this, the Count still had the original serious expression on his face, but he already had an idea in his heart. Finally, Sir Berengar, please stay. The Earl thought for a while, and finally chose to keep Sir Berengar, which attracted a series of surprised voices from everyone sitting. Apparently, Sir Berengar had spoken the Earl's heart that night. No one knew what the Earl of Warwick had said to Sir Berengar, and it was also an unusual night. The next day, the Privy Council of England sent a government notice to Edinburgh in the north. Respected Queen Mother Mary de Guise, in view of the provisions of the Greenwich Treaty signed by the late King and your country, please let your Majesty Queen Mary I of your country move to England to marry your respected Majesty Edward Hall. Now please send Her Majesty the Queen to England. We will conduct an engagement ceremony for the two majesties. I also sincerely invite you to come to England to attend the engagement ceremony. The middle-aged lady read aloud the letter from London, looking at Her Majesty the Queen Mother, who is resting with her eyes closed from time to time. After listening to this letter from England, Her Majesty the Queen Mother stretched her waist, revealing a seductive curve, coupled with the ripeness of being in her 30s. On the end was a ripe peach. From the surname, it can be seen that Her Majesty the Queen Mother is a nobleman from France. She has a resolute and brave character. Edward's marriage to Queen Mary dates from 1544. Under the arrangement of King Henry VIII, Britain and the Soviet Union signed the Greenwich Treaty in 1543, stipulating that Mary would marry the British Prince Edward, that is, Edward VI, and England and Scotland would form an alliance. If the two have no descendants, the alliance will naturally disintegrate. But the Church of Scotland refused to ratify the treaty. In this war in history, after the Duke of Somerset defeated the Scottish army, he searched all over Edinburgh but could not find Queen Mary, which made the Duke return bitterly. At that time, the 5-year-old Queen Mary was hidden by the Queen Mother in the secret room of Stirling Castle, and then was hurriedly taken to France, where she was engaged to the 3-year-old French Crown Prince François. For more than 10 years after that, the Queen Mother of Scotland, Mary de Guise, ruled Scotland like a province of France with the assistance of a French army. Catholics in Scotland embraced French rule, and Protestants gradually adopted a pro-British stance. How Protestantism in England favored the aristocracy, many Scottish nobles had the opportunity to observe, and they joined Protestantism. Thanks, Lee 4,565,645,654, Book Friend 215XXXX25, Lancaster Coup, NRPHF 5, Wang Ru Meng, Book Friend 199XXXX888, Book Friend 1,815,162,023, expressly expressing Zinfin. So he is not called a big gentleman, silent to Fei, watching the sea and listening to the wind. 56-legged brother Mao, legless windwalker, especially the huge villager, the bandit leader of the Shu army, gave a big reward. To be honest, I have been doing an internship recently, so I can only find time to update the novel. I am really sorry. Chapter 56 Hidden number 039, S Time for Revenge. As the mother of the Queen of Scots, Queen Mary had to intrigue with the nobles every day, and she was very annoying. After taking a break, the letter of credentials came from England for a Frenchman. She has been indoctrinated with the idea that Englishmen are villains since she was a child. Since she became the Queen of Scotland, her dislike for England has deepened. It's like there is China on top of Vietnam, the Soviet Union on top of China, and a neighbor stronger than itself. The whole country feels uneasy, especially a country that has long been at odds with its own country, remembering that she was coerced by the nobles to accept England's conditions and let her precious daughter marry the son of a tyrant in England. The Queen Mother couldn't help frowning, and her pretty face became fierce. I finally had a daughter, and I would not give it to the son of a tyrant. Queen Mary couldn't help but made up her mind. Marie de Guise, born November 22, 1515 in Bardic, Lorraine, died in Edinburgh Castle on June 11, 1560, was the second Queen of King James V of Scotland and mother of Queen Mary I of Scots. Marie de Guise was the eldest daughter of Claude de Lorraine, Duke of Guise. On August 4, 1534, she married Louis d'Orleans at the Louvre. The marriage of the two is very happy. Their son Francis was born on October 30, 1535. In 1536 she attended the wedding of King James V of Scotland, her later husband, and the daughter of the King of France in Paris on June 9, 1537. Her husband died and she became a widow of 21 years. Her second son, Louis, was born on August 4 of the same year, and in July of the same year, the wife of James V of Scotland also died. As a traditional ally of France, James V hoped to continue to maintain good relations with France through marriage, so James, through the King of England and his uncle, Henry VIII, sent a message to King Francis I of France expressing his interest in Marie de Guise. Francis I told Mary's father about James' proposal. At first Marie was reluctant to marry because she did not want to leave France, and besides her second son died shortly after birth. But at her father's urging, she agreed. On May 18, 1538, the two married in Notre Dame de Paris. Marie had to leave her son in France after marriage. She was crowned Queen of Scots in Scotland on February 22, 1540. She has two sons, both young. On December 8, 1542, shortly after her daughter Mary was born, James 50 died 6 days later, and Mary I, who was only 6 days old, became Queen of Scots, and Henry VIII took advantage of others' danger and forced Scotland to submit to himself, so that Edward had a baby mother or a girl 5 years younger than him since he was a child. Go get James Hamilton, Earl of Arran. Currently, the Regent of Scotland is James Hamilton, Earl of Arran, second only to the young Queen Mary. As for the Queen Mary, because of the French, although Scotland has been on good terms with France for generations, it is no less than a dream to fully integrate into Scotland and become the Queen Regent soon. There was a sound of footsteps in the Linlithgow Palace, followed by a maid's greeting. Mary knew that it was Earl Arlan who had arrived. Sure enough, a middle-aged man in his 40s walked in, with black and yellow curly hair, a thin face, and a light beard at the corner of his mouth. Under the black coat is a layer of underwear with red envelopes, and black moccasin boots with white borders on the feet, making the whole person look extraordinarily imposing. My dear Lord Regent, you are finally here. Queen Mary couldn't help making a sound when she saw the Earl. She seemed confused about her daughter. My Majesty the Queen Mother. What happened? It made you so flustered, my lord. The matter is like this. Now the Duke of Somerset, Regent of England, that is, the devil Earl 4 years ago, he wants my Mary to marry the tyrant's son. I will never agree to this matter. What's your opinion, my Majesty the Queen Mother? I think it's better to wait for the 4 major families to come together and discuss it together. When the regent heard this, he knew that this was a tricky matter, and he couldn't make a decision by himself at that time. The whole of Scotland was controlled by 4 major families. They were the Earls of Beaton, Argyll, Lennox, and Hamilton. These four families have always been the biggest obstacle to the Scottish king's control of power, and they also firmly control Scotland's rights. In less than an hour, almost everyone from the four major families arrived: Bishop David Beaton, Archibald Campbell, 5th Earl of Argyll, and Adolph Lennox, Earl of Lennox, plus James Hamilton, Earl of Upper Arran. The most powerful person in Scotland is here, gentlemen. The situation is as follows. As the regent, Earl Alan first explained the reason to the other people who came, and handed over England's credentials to the ministers in turn. Within a short time, this group of powerful people in Scotland knew the details. Your Majesty. Gentlemen, I don't think I can agree with England's opinion. After all, the Treaty of Greenwich has not been approved by Parliament, which is invalid. The Earl of Argyll spoke first, clearly expressing his opposition to England's opinion. For a native aristocrat, his family's grievances with the English were too deep. I am also opposed to agreeing to marriage with the English. After all, we are allied with the French. We don't have to be afraid of those English girls. The Earl of Lennox is a pro-French faction, and he has great confidence in Scotland's ally, the French. After all, England lost in the 100 Years' War, gentlemen. I still think we should discuss it carefully. We don't want to repeat the war 4 years ago. Bishop Beaton is a believer who yearns for Protestantism. He still has a relatively high opinion of England, which is the beacon of the Protestant country at this time. I also agree with rejecting the request of the English. Our Scotland must not be handed over to the English. In the end, the Lord Regent made a powerful summary, ending the discussion. Queen Mary, who was watching from the sidelines, also seemed very happy that her daughter didn't have to go to England to suffer. So, let's get ready for a war. It's time for our vengeance. Archbishop Beaton stayed aside and shook his head with emotion. At this time, at Windsor Manor, King Edward received a letter from London. Thanks, Yeo Iang Hoang Hoan, Chif Pingoan, Xiao Bei Veteran, Zinghan. Beacon, loves the stratosphere, specializes in eating books, best man, book friend 160,520,113,042,017, Prussian nobleman, forgive me, especially thanks to Rhyme for his big reward. Chapter 57 The Scottish Highlands. That's very good. Mr. Wallace. You've done a good job. Baron Vitelli Olizard affirmed with a full face, obviously very satisfied with the work of the magistrate. These are the results of the joint efforts of all the adults, and I only have a little credit. Sir Wallace was very happy to be praised, but he did not show off in his words. Then Sir Wallace accompanied the minister to inspect the storage of military rations in Hampshire. Southampton, the village of All Oak, 30 miles from the city, got its name from the village of freedmen because of its proximity to the river All Oak. Freemen are also called public bookholders, which means that they own their own fields, have independent personal freedom, and have no attachment relationship. In fact, the preservation of this village was due to Henry VIII's promulgation of some decrees restricting land enclosures, which made the nobles and local gentlemen throw their hands at a mouse. And the enclosure behavior eased a lot. As a freeman with 3 acres of land, Pud felt very happy. Although the food he planted was not enough for his family, the animals he caught every day, who was good at archery, were enough to make up for his family. Pud couldn't help thanking the environment in which he was born. There was no noble territory near the All Oak village where he lived. The nearest knight territory was more than 20 miles away, and it would take a day to get there. Therefore, the forest near his village nominally belongs to His Majesty the King. But how did the king know that his forest would be hunted? It would be better to expect a sow to climb a tree than to expect the noble staying in the castle to report. There is a saying, the sky is high and the emperor is far away. That is the truth. The glare of the sun at noon could not penetrate the thick poplar leaves. Only a ray of light could barely pass through the gaps in the leaves, and came to Pud's face, bringing a little warmth. Pud didn't pay attention to this, standing with his legs bent, his eyes staring straight ahead. 20 feet away, a bull elk lowered his head, vigilantly eating the young leaves on the branches, with 4 slender legs in a posture of running at any time. And Pud is covered with folded branches, perfectly concealing himself in the bushes. With one arm holding the bow and the other hand pulling the bowstring, his eyes are closely following the elk, ready to move. It may not have seen danger for a long time, and the small bites did not fill their stomachs. The big elk slowly lowered its head and gorged on the delicious food in front of it, but Pud hadn't acted yet. Time passed like running water, and the bull elk's belly swelled annoyingly, and his vigilance reached the lowest level. But Pud seized the time to act. At this time, whoosh, Pud's right hand was released suddenly, and the wooden arrow on the bowstring immediately shot at the buck. The buck seemed to be aware of it and moved a step to the right, But unfortunately it was too late, although the wooden arrow missed it. The fatal part, but shot its left hind leg. Pud ran quickly from the bushes and rammed to the wounded buck. Regardless of the injury, the buck hurriedly ran towards the direction it came from, but it couldn't run very far after being injured. After being chased by Pud for less than a mile, the buck fell to the ground. Obviously, the consequences of excessive blood loss were very serious. Perdue looked at the buck lying on the ground, ignored its begging eyes, and decisively killed it with a dagger he captured from the battlefield, without any muddling. As a veteran who had joined the army 5 times, Pud's hands were very strong, so the buck died without pain, using a few branches to form a well-shaped shape horizontally and vertically, and then taking a few tree vines to fix the buck on it, using a thick rattan as a rope. Pud dragged it back home like this. The villagers along the way were used to this scene, so Pud greeted them smoothly and returned to his home. Everyone admires this man who has participated in the army 5 times and is also the strongest shooter in the village. After all, which family has not received a few pieces of meat from him? Pushing open the wooden door of the house, Pud saw his former centurion and now the captain of the Yorkshire Sheriff, Wood Legolas, Master Centurion. "Why are you here?" Pud asked curiously. "My Perdue, the most powerful shooter, I need you." Wood pretended not to see the buck in Pud's hand, and greeted him happily. "Say it, my Lord Centurion. I've been very busy recently." For this greedy centurion, Pud didn't like or dislike him. "The Duke of Somerset of London has issued a summons, and you are going to battle again. You should follow me this time. I only want 3 layers of loot for you to capture this time." Wood gritted his teeth and said, but his heart was bleeding. As the second son of a Jazz, he has very little property of his own, and is preparing to rely on war to earn extra money, and this time he lost a lot. But this time, if he earns some more military exploits, he can be named a knight. Although he is a knight without a fief, his status is completely different. "Okay. I hope you keep your promise." Seeing the bleeding from the greedy guy in front of him, Pud agreed happily. Like Perdue, a large number of militiamen were called up and slowly flowed into York City like a stream. Soon, by August 10th, nearly 15,000 people had gathered in York's barracks. At this time, Scotland, Edinburgh also issued a summons. Unfortunately, the Knight of Gossel sent by the regent is going to the residence of the barbarians, the Scottish Highlands. The Knight of Gossel looked at the endless highlands. It was not like the endless forests on the lowlands of Edinburgh, nor was it a lonely desert, but was covered by soothing undulating low green grass, and whilst the low, sparse vegetation grew bleakly, not at all like the verdant green of the English fields. The exposed rocks and the clear air always remind you that this is a plateau on the island. Even in summer, when the wilderness is covered with small purple flowers called heather, the earth lacks a kind of vitality. The boundless purple is too dazzling and stubborn, different from the brilliant splendor of mountain flowers, but a kind of full bloom that is almost desperate. This is a lonely land, which was regarded as a barren land many years ago, and no matter how magnificent and beautiful the scenery is, it cannot replace the barrenness of the land. Clan MacDonald, also known as Clan Donald, Clan Donald, is one of the largest and oldest clans in the Scottish Highlands. As early as the 13th century AD, the lords of the Donald family established Fort Faragran on the shores of Lake Faragran in Isle of Islay, Isle of Islay. Throughout the 14th and 15th centuries, the MacDonald clan was the most powerful tribe in Scotland, ruling the entire valley region of western Scotland and the surrounding islands, known as the Lord of the Isles. Lord of the Isles. Thank you, LP001735, Love and Sorrow, Gynecological Little Warm Man, Legolas Windwalker, 56-legged hairy brother, Prussian nobleman, book friend Juan, the cute hang that, shameless little begging for a recommendation ticket. Chapter 58. Knight Gossel stood on the hill, looking at a group of tribes in the distance. This was his destination. The MacDonald clan's scattered slaves are guarding the flock of sheep not far away, and naughty children are chasing each other unscrupulously, creating a peaceful atmosphere. Suddenly, more than a dozen cavalry surrounded Gosser from the left and right sides. Before Gosser could react, all kinds of bronze weapons were put on his neck. "I surrender. Warriors, put down the knife first. I am the messenger sent by His Majesty the King." Knight Gossel begged for mercy tactfully, and he did not forget to emphasize his identity, especially the word king was pronounced heavily. "Okay. I'll take you to meet the leader. Don't act rashly." Among the cavalry, the tallest man spoke first, and it was obvious that he had great prestige. "Okay. Then can you put down the knife? If you hurt me by mistake, your leader will blame you." Gosser shrank his neck and asked the burly man's opinion softly, with a shadowy tone in his tone. obscure threat. While hearing the little boy in front of him say this, Johnny felt that he was not threatening, so he nodded towards the cavalry, and there was a sound of putting away the weapon. Immediately afterwards, Gosser was escorted forward like a prisoner under torture, which made him very unhappy. After a while, he came to the tribe group he saw. If he went in, there were hundreds of tents, and these were just the two sides of the journey into the center of the tribe. In a bold estimate, there should be about 500 tents. Knight Gossel thought silently in his heart, and was very surprised. In such a tribe where all the people are soldiers, almost every family lives in the same tent, so each tent can produce 2 warriors, and the MacDonald tribe alone can produce more than 1,000 warriors. Moreover, slaves can also be regarded as a type of warrior. Based on this calculation, this tribe is expected to produce more than 1,500 warriors, which is also its limit. In this era, when tens of thousands of people are in a battle, a tribe has the strength of a count. In Europa, the warriors in the Scottish Highlands are tall and burly, and they are the bravest warriors in Scotland. Even in the face of heavily armed English heavy knights, they are not afraid. There are more than a dozen such large tribes loyal to the Scottish king on the Highlands, and there are countless small tribes of various colors. They are Scotland's greatest confidence against England. Afterwards, Gosser went into the most luxurious big tent, where a middle-aged man with a messy black and white beard sat on a wolfskin wooden chair. The servant of Her Majesty the Great Queen of Scotland, Gossel Yarley, has seen Lord Baron MacDonald. Gossel rested his left hand on his chest and lowered his head slightly to express his respect. Asha MacDonald is the leader of the MacDonald tribe and a baron conferred by James V of Scotland, so Gossel has to give a noble salute. "What news did James from Edinburgh bring to me?" the leader said boldly, without any scruples about Earl Argyle's status as regent. "This is a letter from the Lord Regent, please read it." Gosser pretended not to hear, and took out the letter from his chest, ready to hand it to the maid next to him. "No need. Tell me directly." Chief Asham stopped Gosser's behavior and ordered directly, "Yes, Your Excellency the Baron." Gossel forgot that these barbarians who only knew how to fight could not read, so he explained loudly, "My lord, it's mainly from England." After more than 10 minutes, the leader of Asham finally understood the whole story, and Gosser heaved a sigh of relief. "Then we're going to fight those people in England. If you didn't say it earlier, why are you so dawdling? You nobles are dawdling." This sentence made Gosser speechless, and he didn't have the guts to confront him. After all, they were really a bunch of savages. If they killed him for no reason, he would have no reason to go. "Johnny, hurry up and call the boys together. Each family will produce a warrior. The little Queen of Edinburgh needs us." The leader of Asham spoke loudly to the burly man escorting Gosser, and the burly man responded loudly, turned around and left the tent. Next, Gosser saw an unforgettable scene. A family of women and children cheerfully sent off their husbands or fathers and packed their weapons. In less than half an hour, more than 500 brave warriors with bronze weapons gathered in front of the leader's tent, which was very spectacular. "Knight Gosser, look at what a brave warrior this is. How can the English be our opponents?" Looking at the warriors with an average height of 6 feet in front of him, the muscles on his arms are particularly exaggerated because of the frequent consumption of mutton compared with the knights in Edinburgh. Except for weapons, these tribal warriors beat those knights in other places. Knights like Gosser were sent to the northern highlands of Scotland by the regent, Earl James Hamilton. Like casting a net in this way, after more than 10 days, Edinburgh gathered more than 20,000 tribal barbarians, more than 10,000 called noble private soldiers, and hundreds of knights of various colors. This is almost the entire power of Scotland. Although the number seems large, they almost have a fatal weakness. Weapons. Scotland has always been rich in coal, iron, copper and other mineral resources, but iron ore mining is very difficult, so the Scots have been mixing copper and tin to make bronze, which has become the weapon they have always used. Only in those places, the knights wore iron armor and used iron weapons, which aroused the envy of the Highland warriors. On August 12, 1547, all the Scottish troops gathered in the outskirts of Edinburgh, and the regent, James Hamilton, Earl of Allen, came to hold an oath meeting. The tribal warriors in the Highlands were arranged to the left, while the private soldiers of the nobles were on the right. At the front were knights, nobles and tribal leaders from all over the place. Although the warriors of the tribe were standing loosely, they looked exceptionally strong on the whole, so the Lord Regent, who had just arrived, took a special look at them carefully. And because of the plundering war 4 years ago, the knights were quickly recruited to fight against the English because of the short distance, so they suffered heavy losses. They came to make up the numbers in this war with the support of a group of nobles. The Earl walked to the specially built wooden platform, cleared his throat, let go of his voice and said, all nobles, knights, and Her Majesty's loyal warriors. Everyone must have known that the shameful thieves in the south are preparing to invade our territory again. They burned, killed and looted on the land of Scotland, doing all kinds of evil, and this time they even came to rob our Majesty the Queen. Under such circumstances, after discussing with a council of elders and many nobles, we decided to attack those barbaric Englishmen. Let us, under the guidance of God, fight together for Her Majesty the Queen. Fight for the Queen. Fight for the Queen. Under the Earl's speech, the knights in the front row shouted in unison, and the soldiers and Highland warriors in the back also shouted thanks to the lonely boy, Minhang Dreamtalk, Langkaterku, Jin Yu Jin, LP 001735, Moment of Cheryl, Silent Defay, Little White Veteran, Book Friends 160,328,233,758,532, Legolas Windrunner, 56-legged Mao Jen, Prussian nobleman, Rhyme, Don't Worry About Two Copies, Quis, Feng Yi Young Xiu, AI Stratosphere, Best Man, Everyone's Big Vote Support. Chapter 59, Battle of Pink. The Scottish army is preparing for the oath meeting, and the Duke of Somerset has arrived in York and is preparing for the battle. Your Excellency the Baron. Can York's barracks hold our army? Duke Edward rushed to York City in a hurry, and before he could catch his breath, he summoned Baron Vitelli Olizard and asked, My Lord Duke, our Northern Council of York has arranged for the barracks that you personally conquered in Scotland 4 years ago. We are afraid to delay your important event, Duke, and we have expanded it a lot. Baron Olizard trotted all the way over. His fat body couldn't bear it, and there were still a few drops of sweat on his forehead. But the most powerful man in all England is here. Can he not come quickly? It is estimated that the barracks in the south of the city can accommodate 30,000 troops. Regarding the Baron's answer, Duke Edward said it was okay, but for Duke Edward, who often led the army, food and weapons and equipment were the most basic configurations for the victory of the army then. My Lord Baron, have you prepared the food and weapons? Of course. Your Excellency the Duke. As you know, the city of York was established for Scotland. There are 808,965 pounds of rye and 105,000 pounds of oats in the entire York warehouse. These are enough to feed the current 15,000 troops for 40 days, and can also meet the monthly needs of 1,000 war horses. In the Middle Ages, war horses generally only ate oats to maintain their physical strength, but the pitfall was that the harvest of oats per acre was only 1/3 of that of ordinary rye. But the price is more than 10 times more expensive than rye. Therefore, at that time, a horse consumed 10 times as much money as an ordinary soldier every day. Even the knights are usually fed with a mixture of barley and oats, but in times of war, they must be fed with oats. Moreover, we have 3,000 longbows in stock, 100,000 sharp arrows, 500 pairs of heavy armor, and more than 1,000 matchlock guns. Before Duke Edward could ask, the Baron had already said everything in one breath. Wait. Is there enough gunpowder for the matchlock gun? Duke Edward couldn't help asking when he heard this. As a general with rich experience in war, Edward likes to use the new weapon of matchlock gun very much. He believes that this effectively reduces the dependence on soldiers and is conducive to the minority against the majority. That. Your Excellency the Duke. Our army is very unfamiliar with this new type of weapon, so there's only enough for more than 1,000 musketeers to use it about 5 times. Okay. You go down first. Prepare a delicious roast lamb for the soldiers who came from afar to celebrate. Duke Edward knew that the morale of the soldiers was easy to buy, and a little mutton could boost their morale. Okay. Your Excellency the Duke. The Baron was very surprised why the Duke asked him to do this, but as a subordinate, he didn't ask too much. However, his heart was already bleeding, and the preparation of food and grass for the army had almost drained York City's blood. If this kind of reward army came again, if this war did not win, York City would go bankrupt. On August 13th, Lord Duke Edward officially came to the barracks, summoned the main nobles to distribute the team, and gathered the archers and knights. More than 500 tall infantrymen were selected to put on heavy armor and act as heavy infantry. Then screen out more than 1,000 soldiers who can use matchlock guns to form a musket formation. After that, His Excellency the Duke selected more than 1,000 old and weak soldiers to serve as the logistics battalion, responsible for transporting food. At this time, the Earl of Warwick also rushed to York City, leading the logistics battalion. With a depressed mind, Duke Edward selected more than 1,000 elite militiamen as his guards to protect himself full-time. In this way, on the 14th day, the entire army took on a completely new look, and there was no such a chaotic scene as when it came at this time. The army ruled by Edward had a battalion of 2,000 archers, a musketeer of 1,500 heavy infantry, 1,000 heavy cavalry, 1,000 light cavalry, 1,000 guards, and 1,000 soldiers. The logistics battalion has more than 9,000 light infantry. Scotland has nearly 5,000 cavalry, 200 heavy cavalry, and 2,000 archers, as well as a maximum of 23,000 infantry, and 200 musketeers under the leadership of Duke Edward. The English army broke through the 73-mile-long Hadrian's Wall, which is the 117-kilometer-long Roman Great Wall, and marched to the territory of Scotland behind the army led by His Excellency the Duke. A large group of small merchants, and many chicken girls doing business with men slowly followed the army, but those big merchants stayed in York City, waiting for the soldiers who returned from victory to sell their precious items. Generally speaking, soldiers will only sell valuable items to small merchants, and very valuable goods can only be swallowed by big merchants. The army swept towards the Scottish villages like locusts, and the soldiers rushed towards the wooden houses like howling. The village also responded quickly. But dozens of young and strong forces were no match for the huge English army. Soon, the gates of several villages near the border were opened, and women's cries and men's resentment could be heard not far away. The militiamen grabbed a large amount of food and goods and traded with the merchants behind the villages. That can remain in the border areas are only those who have the guts of the great nobles across England and Scotland, so the militiamen wisely did not kill people, but just robbed some food and items. Obviously, they also knew that they could not afford to offend the nobles who owned these villages. These nobles across the two countries are mainly caused by the marriage between the nobles of the two countries. For example, James I married Joan, the daughter of the Earl of Somerset, a nobleman during Henry VIII, and James IV married Margaret, the daughter of King Henry VIII. Their son James V and his descendants thus possessed the right of succession to the throne of England. This is why James VI inherited the Tudor throne left by Elizabeth I. Therefore, the relationship between England and Scotland is intricate and cannot be simply sorted out. The looting of villages was just a small episode between the troops, and it did not delay the progress of the troops in the slightest. On August 15, the English army, led by Duke Edward, came to a wide grassland, which was called Pinkie by the Scots. As the name suggests, it is a canyon like a person's little finger, and it is a good place to fight. The Earl of Allen also led the Scottish army here. Both of them believed that they would win, so they chose this place as the decisive battle. Without exception, the regents of the two countries are pitted against each other, and it is a place that attracts the attention of all in both countries. Thanks, Youngsign, GHJNFG, Minhang Dream Talk, Lonely Boy, Jinhao Eugen, WeWeU 0026 amp, 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 amp. 160,328,233,758,532, Gynecology. Little Nuanan, Silent Defay, Love Stratosphere, Legolas Windrunner, Dandan Danhua, Graffiti TT, Yandy 580, Prussian Nobleman, Gwis. Thank you for your support. Chapter 60, Battle of Pink. The next day, at noon, the Duke of Edward gave the soldiers a full meal, and then placed the army at the smaller end of the Pink Valley, and the Earl of Argyll also stopped the army at the larger section of the Pink Valley exit. Most of the entire army is wearing red jackets, and the whole team looks very energetic, which is also the origin of the England Red Shrimp soldiers. Seen from a distance, a sea of fiery red soldiers usually wear red jackets. The outermost jacket is black, and there are golden roses and crowns on it. In addition, they wear red or black hats with white feathers, and breeches will be of various colors. In the first half of the 16th century, British soldiers had their markings on the chest and back, and later also on shields and pennons. Usually the Red Cross of St. George. Officers generally wear ribbons, which are usually around the waist or hung from the left shoulder. Some spearmen and cavalry have become representatives of this superior class. The ribbon seems to be red, or red and white as in other armies of the era. Officers were distinguished from their soldiers by their weapons. Swords and shields, half-length lances, or halberds were favorites for officers, by silk, satin, more expensive clothing, embellishments through gold or silver, more aesthetically pleasing armor, and jewelry. The Scots mainly wear a simple iron helmet, a jacket, a white tight tunic and trousers, and the arms and thighs are protected with 4 to 5 rows of copper chain mail in the later stage to prevent sword cuts. A large turban is wrapped around the neck 3 to 4 times, which is not to protect against the cold, but to prevent cutting. The other protective equipment is a small buckler in the left hand, which can be used even when holding a spear, and their secondary weapons are broadswords and daggers. Lowlanders of the 16th century usually wore blue bonnets, and other common clothing colors were brown and light blue. In the campaigns of this period, more than 70% of the Scottish army consisted of spearmen. Highland tribesmen generally wear a lena cruach, a knee-length garment, usually dyed yellow with saffron, with a larger cape or plaid shawl fastened with a brooch. This is usually worn by leaders. The only protection common to the common Highland tribesmen was a tar-covered and hardened buckskin belt jacket, though in any case they often went into battle shirtless, though sometimes a short shirt was left to tuck the excess over the belt between the legs. So the scene that can be seen at that time is like this. The English area is basically red, and the more than 1,000 cavalry in front and the more than 500 heavy cavalry are all dressed in blue and white. On the Scottish side, there are a lot of flesh colors in the front, and a piece of yellow in the back. How should I say it? Anyway, it's very coordinated. Lord Earl of Wellington. Duke Edward rode a large horse on an artificially built high place in the rear. Looking at the Scottish army on the opposite side, he couldn't help calling the name of the cavalry commander. Yes, Your Excellency the Duke. Earl Wellington was beside Edward, and when he heard him being called, he hurried forward. You first lead the cavalry to take the initiative to charge and wipe out a group of dwarf cavalry on the opposite side. Yes, Your Excellency the Duke. I'll go now. Earl Wellington was very confident in his riding skills, and his voice of agreement was hearty. After taking a look at the knight standing behind the Duke like a pole, he sighed, then mounted his steed, and returned to his post to perform the task. The knight is the nephew of the Earl of Wellington and the sole heir of the Earl of Wellington, a stubborn young man. In order not to put him in any danger, the Earl specially arranged him to be with Duke Edward, so that there was no danger and it was easy to take credit. Unfortunately, ever since the stubborn knight knew that he had become the coach's personal guard, he guessed that it was the Earl of Wellington who made it, so he has been ignoring him until now. Staring at the direction where Earl Wellington was going away, the young knight had a stubborn and sad face, with concern in his eyes, and pursed lips. Don't worry, my knight. Earl Wellington's riding skills are well known among nobles, God will bless him. Seeing the young knight's worried look, Edward couldn't help being comforted. Duke Edward, an independent young aristocrat like him, appreciates it very much, and he is also the heir of an earl, which arouses Edward's attention even more. The Count returned to his team, looking at the more than 1,000 light cavalry and 1,000 heavy cavalry behind him. He couldn't help feeling a rush of pride in his heart. Everyone, for His Majesty the King. Follow me. The Earl rushed to the Scottish army on the opposite side, and then his family's cavalry rushed up to protect him, and then the entire cavalry troop rushed up. Most of the cavalry were border cavalry with excellent riding skills. They formed a large wall behind the Earl well and stabbed the Scottish troops. The slower heavy cavalry followed closely behind. The Earl of Argyll saw the English cavalry rushing towards him. With a serious expression and frowning, ordered the artillery team to shell first, and then let the cavalry attack. Yes, Lord Earl. After hearing this, the messenger at the side immediately mounted his horse and conveyed the commander's order. To be honest, the regent didn't want to send out cavalry at all, because compared with the fine horses of the English, the horses of the Scots were inferior horses, and England had too great an advantage. So artillery is why it is popular with the Scots. Generally speaking, this is the strength of the Scottish army, although it does not always have the opportunity to be recognized and used reasonably effectively. The cannon team that completed training and participated in the Pinkie campaign included 2 standard cannons, 1 variant cannon, 2 standard heavy cannons, and 1 speeding cannon. Therefore, when the Earl of Wellington was still a mile away from the Scottish army, the Scots cannons fired over, but the Earl was not afraid at all, because he knew that the aim of the cannons was extremely low. In fact, as the Earl expected, the 3 rounds of shelling only killed a dozen cavalrymen, and 2 of them died after their horses tripped over stones. Soon, the Earl came to the Scots army, and a group of Scottish cavalry, which was more than the cavalry behind him, was galloping on pony horses. The Count showed no fear, and greeted him with a determined face. In an instant, the cavalry collided with each other. Dozens of people flew out from the front row, and more Scots flew out. The Earl was guarded by the cavalry of the family, and he did not fly out safely. Immediately afterwards, after the cavalry of both sides approached, they fought each other. At first, the English cavalry relied on the advantage of horse height to kill the Scots. Even the Earl killed 3 Scottish cavalry, but soon, the Scots took advantage of the large number of people and began to fight with the English. All of a sudden, the English cavalry fell into a bitter battle. Thank you, book friends. 150,501,213,545,468, Miwanki Anayo. LP001735, Lancaster coup, Chen Yang, Earl of Cadwin, falling on a spring night, love the stratosphere, owls are flying, silent to Fay, knocking down the wall dripping pig, Peter, Legolas Windwalker, Lily 599, Brother Mao with 56 legs, who specializes in eating books, Taiji Temple, Graffiti TTY, Prussian Nobleman, Lonely Boy Vinau, Q Heng, Best Man, Countercurrent Ban, thank you for your support. There are still many big voting records that cannot be seen on the assistant. Sorry Big, now I am the assistant and Gideon to watch together, and try not to miss one. I also want to thank the Prussian nobles for their rewards and support all the time. I will try my best to finish it. Chapter 61, Battle of Pink. In less than 2 minutes, a quarter of the Earl's light cavalry had been wiped out, and the Scottish casualties were 3 times that of the English, but it was of no use. The Scots were crushed by the sheer numbers of them. As a result, the remaining cavalry united closely with Earl Wellington, working together to resist the Scottish cavalry, and waiting for the arrival of the heavy cavalry. By the way, a part of the Scottish cavalry slowly surrounded the Earl's group, leaving about 3,000 people to meet the slow heavy cavalry. The last time Duke Edward robbed Edinburgh, he used light cavalry. The Scots now have no intuitive impression of heavy cavalry, and the only information they get is that it is very powerful, so the Scots put up a big formation to meet the last heavy cavalry. Boom. Boom. An irregular voice came to the ears of the cavalry, and they could only see a row of monsters in iron armor and leather armor on their horses, walking heavy steps, leading. He ran over with a loud noise, and Earl Allen, who was on the high ground, could see the heavy cavalry in the distance running with heavy dust, rushing towards the self-conscious cavalry with an unstoppable momentum. The Earl hurriedly ordered, "Tell the nobles to retreat first, and let the group of Highlanders rush up." Looking at the Count with a scared expression on his face, the attendant didn't dare to delay for a moment, and hurriedly gave instructions to the messenger. In the Middle Ages, the nobility was the representative of the place where the king ruled. Obviously, the nobility was much more important than those barbaric Highland warriors. The messenger came to the heavy cavalry composed of nobles with the Lord Regent's password, and conveyed the Regent's order. Seeing the heavy cavalry getting closer and closer, the nobles couldn't help stepping on their mounts one after another, turned and ran to the rear in a hurry. Seeing the nobles running back, the Highland warriors started to make noise, shaking their shields constantly. "What are you doing? The Lord Regent ordered you to support the cavalry at any time. Who dares to disobey the order? Be careful of your own head." Seeing the Highland infantry gradually becoming chaotic, the orderly reprimanded them loudly because of the absence of the tribal leader. Even the warlike Highland warriors would not contradict the order of the regent. Slowly, the soldiers' attention was drawn to the situation ahead again, and the tense atmosphere could not help but ease. The orderly's nerves relaxed immediately. He took a breath, and steered his mount back to the regent's back. The time seemed to be quite long, but in fact, it was only a short while before the heavy cavalry from England crashed into the Scottish cavalry, who were waiting in full force. The knight with iron armor all over his body can only see the eyes under the iron mask, which looks cold, especially the round and bright eyes, as if Satan from hell. The cavalrymen in the front row were pushed down several feet by the long javelin along with their horses, and the cavalrymen behind were also implicated and used as cushions. In just an instant, hundreds of cavalrymen disappeared into this world. Then, the heavy cavalry continued to rush forward by virtue of inertia, and the Scottish cavalry in front seemed to be frightened, allowing them to crush. Many of them stared wide-eyed before dying. However, the Earl of Wellington and the others saw that the front, which was still full of cavalry a few breaths ago, was suddenly emptied, leaving only various rotten meat and severed limbs, and white brains flowing everywhere. "Lord Earl, are you all right?" The leader of the paused heavy cavalry came out first and asked the stunned Earl. "Oh, and it's okay. Knights, let's continue to kill the enemy." The Earl stared at the knight with white brains on the armor in front of him. He was stunned, but he quickly reacted and issued an order. "Follow your orders, Honorable Earl." The Earl's voice awakened the dazed cavalry behind him, and all the cavalry responded as if they had just woken up from a dream. Soon, the situation on the battlefield was reversed. The Scottish cavalry, who had just abused the English cavalry very happily, now seemed like a bereaved dog, letting the English cavalry with fewer numbers than themselves chase after them. The cavalry ran around in a panic. Many people were either tripped and fell to death, or were hacked to death by the cavalry behind. When the cavalry fled back to the rear of the infantry, there were only less than 2,000 of the 5,000 troops at the beginning, but after the statistics, the conclusions drawn were ridiculous. much higher than those killed by English cavalry. The failure of the cavalry duel was most likely caused by Earl Allen's miscalculation, since the Scottish monarch James IV was killed in battle with the English army at the Battle of Flodden Fields on September 9, 1513. Scotland has also withdrawn from the Holy League War due to its defeat. Scotland and England have long maintained small-scale conflicts, while England has been fighting France. It is very learned from France's heavy knight style. Therefore, the unfamiliarity with the heavy cavalry led to the defeat of the cavalry. The English cavalry flicked their tails and returned to their rear with joy to recuperate. Next came the confrontation of infantry. The Scots set up their small bucklers and walked slowly forward, while the English also sent out their own infantry. The two armies approached slowly, and within 5 minutes, the infantry handed over shortly. With the ferocity of the Highland warriors, the English were not only inferior to them in height, but also difficult to match in strength. After a while, the English infantry in front were routed and rushed back to the infantry in the rear, disrupting the infantry's pace. Seeing this, Duke Edward nodded to the leader of the longbowmen, and the leader immediately nodded understandingly. Immediately, England's world-renowned longbowmen began to show off. Longbowmen in England usually have their faces and ears tightly wrapped with cloth, their shoulders are covered with chains, their wrists are protected with leather ropes and leather blocks, their finger joints are protected by leather sheaths, and their belts are hung with daggers and leather bags. They wear all kinds of armor, some of which are just a simple layered bodysuit. Each archer carries 24 arrows, bundled and put into the quiver. When you run out, go to the supply caravan to get it. Most archers would rather carry arrows in their belt than laboriously place them in their quiver. Arrows can also be hung behind the back. When defending, they put arrows on the ground in front of their feet, which can be used more conveniently. The 3,000 longbowmen shot a round of sharp arrows in unison, and the Highland warriors on the opposite side saw the flying arrows coming from the sky, and hurriedly raised their round shields. It's a pity that the shield is too small. 3,000 sharp arrows fell from the sky, taking away many brave warriors. It can't be brought to the remaining fighters either. An obliterated nightmare. After 10 rounds of volley, more than 1,000 English infantry were taken away, as well as more than 3,000 Highland soldiers, and more than 5,000 soldiers were injured and unable to move. Many soldiers protected the fatal parts, but were captured by the English because of their injuries. Seeing the disastrous defeat of the Scottish army, the Lord Regent immediately gave the order to retreat regardless of calming down his mood, and hurriedly fled with the nobles. Seeing the collapse of the Scottish infantry, Duke Edward shouted sharply from his white horse, "The whole army is attacking. Go!" Afterwards, the Guard battalion rushed into the battlefield following the Duke, and Earl Wellington didn't care about resting, and led the cavalry to the battlefield again. At this most intense moment, the Earl of Warwick is urging the logistics team to deliver food and grass. Thanks, GFJNFG, Miwankianayo, Shanhu Kingshen, Yuangshink, Book Friend 1,887,429,393, Langkad Turku, Alaliayong, LP 001735, Book Friend 1,255,061,203, Holding Hands 2015, Earl Cadwin, Speechless Afay, Little White Veteran, Love Stratosphere, Legolas Windrunner, Jinhao Eugen, Prussian Nobleman, Q Tangheng, Graffiti TTY, Rhyme, 56-Legged Mayoge, Plato's Symposium, everyone's big vote support regarding the time for the protagonist to be in charge. It's coming soon. Don't worry. Girls will too. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62 Closed Exit. The infantry, which was collapsing, was slaughtered by the recharged Guard battalion and the tyrannical cavalry, and they turned around and ran away, no longer caring about the formation. As he ran, he disliked that the weapon was too heavy, so he threw away the weapon in his hand and started to flee desperately. The Scottish cavalry, who was recuperating at the rear, saw the infantry in front of them fleeing, so they hurriedly mounted their pony horses and fled towards the exit of the canyon. Relying on the horses' ability to move quickly, the cavalry quickly got rid of the infantry, and one by one began to whip the horses that were usually cherished and abnormal with the whip, and the whip became more and more powerful. Soon, the fast running infantry saw the cavalry overtake them, step by step away from the fate of death. Seeing this, many brave infantrymen couldn't help running fast, and quickly approached the slower cavalry among them. Jenner is such a person who seeks a chance to survive. He came from a small tribe on a high mountain with a population of just over 100 people. This time their tribe was called by the regent and sent 10 warriors to participate in the war. As the bravest warrior of a tribe and also the leader of the tribe, he must lead the warriors of the tribe back in the chaos. Otherwise, the entire tribe will be annexed by neighboring tribes and all become slaves. As the leader of the Highland tribe, he knew the pain of slaves, and he could not allow his relatives and friends to become slaves of other tribes. Standing 6 feet tall, with arms thicker than the average English thigh, Gurner was already at an advantage in an age when most people were malnourished. However, the people who can become leaders are not barbarians without brains, and the tribe of barbarians has long been annexed. Boss. What should we do? Yes. Boss. Boss. I want to go home. Seeing the tribal fighters around him discussing one by one, Jenner suppressed his inner panic and said calmly, "Everyone, don't panic. Let's get together first. There will always be a chance." The 10 people, led by Jenner, ran slowly towards the exit of Pink Canyon. The speed of the few people quickly saw dozens of cavalry at the end. Seeing this, Jenner couldn't help but feel a move in his heart. "Come here, I'll tell you how to escape for your life." Jenner gathered the tribe's warriors and told them his plan, and immediately got everyone's admiring gaze. Next, we saw Jenner and others approaching the cavalry. At this time, they started to run fast, keeping the speed parallel to the horses. The 10 warriors were divided into 5 teams, and the 2 cooperated to snatch a cavalry. Soon, their movement together seemed to be noticed by the cavalry, and the surrounded cavalry seemed to have expected something, and hurriedly urged the horse to speed up. Knowing that there was no longer any delay, Gunner took the lead in demonstrating. Nar, who was running, picked up the spear that had been thrown on the ground, exhausted all his strength, and threw it towards the cavalry. Boom! There was a loud noise. As he wished, the cavalry on horseback was hit hard by the spear, and fell off the horse. Just listening to that sound, Jenner felt very painful. The horse felt that there was no one on its back. After running for dozens of steps, it stopped slowly and lowered its head to eat the tender grass on the ground. Another soldier tactfully ran over to lead the horse, and came to Jenner with a look of admiration on his face. Boom! 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 Jenner's demonstration action was very meaningful, and the remaining fighters quickly knocked down their targets and got 4 more mounts. Boss, your method is very good. We can finally go home. The rest of the people also nodded quickly, with a happy smile on their faces, showing their yellow teeth. Okay. Let's continue to follow this method again. Although Jenner was also very happy in his heart, he still made a serious expression. In the next half an hour, they rode the captured horses and came several times in the same way. Soon, almost every one of them had 3 horses, and the chances of escaping were much higher. But a Lord Regent of Scotland is not as miserable as Gurner, but he is not much better. Lord Earl Allen's mood is broken at this time. The failure 3 years ago can still be prevaricated by the reason that the previous king passed away, and he was unprepared and was attacked by surprise. But this time, it was purely because the Scottish army fought against the English in an upright manner, and there was no conspiracy at all. And they really failed miserably, a failure that flowed like clouds and water, without a chance to breathe. Lord Earl, let's stop and rest for a while. There were only 200 shelled knights around him, and to be precise, a group of knights without armor accompanied him. Hearing the inquiry from the most experienced knight Baird among the knights, the Earl also responded in a rare way. No need. Let's wait until we get out of Pink Canyon. Looking at the regent, who used to have a high-spirited face, now his face is gray, and his previously neatly combed beard looks messy, and the aristocratic clothes on his body were scratched by something, and there was a hole in his arm. Yes. Lord Earl. Everyone hurry up and hold on. You can escape soon. Knight Baird cheered on the exhausted knights. Hearing that they could go out soon, the knights mustered up the remaining energy and drove forward in their cars. The Earl and his party moved very quickly, and quickly saw the narrow exit of the canyon. After all, their mounts are the most sophisticated, and their running speed is naturally faster than that of ordinary knights, not to mention that they are the fastest to escape from the battlefield. Lord Earl. Look, the exit is here. Baird said excitedly to Earl Argyle, who was lying on his horse behind him. Really? Then let's go out quickly. The Earl said succinctly. After a while, more than 200 people escaped from the battlefield, and everyone on horseback breathed a sigh of relief after stopping their horses to rest for a while. Gray and his soldiers also changed horses to overtake most of the cavalry and came to the exit first. Before he was happy for a long time, he saw Earl Argyle and his party resting at the exit. Honorable Lord Regent, Jenna of the Check and his tribe is glad that you came out safely. Garner clumsily learned the Scottish knight greeting, and his antics made the Earl laugh out loud. "My lord leader, I'm glad you escaped England's clutches safely. Now let's go back to Edinburgh together." Lord Earl cherishes every ounce of strength now, and it is considered a skill compared to those who can escape. "As you wish, Lord Earl." Jenner discussed with his soldiers, and they all believed that this was a feasible solution at present. "This is a wise choice, my leader." The Earl hadn't finished his conversation with Jenner, and more than 1,000 cavalrymen appeared one after another at the exit. "My soldiers, let's block this exit." "Thanks, Younshine." Lancaster coup, book friends. 1,887,429,393, LP 001735, Chen, Yang, Guis, Q Tangheng, Graffiti Tty, Xinghao, 56-legged hair brother, gynecological warm man, love stratosphere, owls are flying, Legolas Windwalker, Jinhao Eugen, GFJNFG, specialize in eating books, best man, Prussian nobleman, DK, Phi, and also, thanks to the Prussian nobles for their great rewards. I have always known about your support, and you must do what you can to reward. Don't be vindictive. Chapter 63, Battle Results. What? Lord Earl, why are we blocking the exit? Jenner didn't quite understand what Earl Argyle meant. He was still too naive. Yes, Honorable Earl, besides, we won't be able to block such a big exit for a while. The English will soon come after us. Nightbeard couldn't help but frown, echoing. Obviously he still had some opinions on the Earl's order at this moment of escaping. There is no time to do other things to delay than block it with stones and tree trunks. Hurry up. Earl Allen did not explain anything, but still ordered in an orderly tone. In desperation, Jenner and Nightbeard had no choice but to order their subordinates to help. It took less than 10 minutes for more than 1,000 people to pile up a 5-foot-high small great wall at the mouth of the valley, which was more than 50 feet wide. Looking at the masterpiece in front of him, the Earl smiled for a long time, and finally he let go of his heart that had been suspended for a long time. "Go, my gentlemen. Return to the safety of Edinburgh." The Lord Regent waved his hand, pointed in the direction of Edinburgh in the distance, and galloped on his horse. Jenner and his tribal warriors also happily followed. Baird also hurriedly greeted the knights, and the tired cavalry who had just been dismounting to carry things and were panting to follow. As a result, the Scottish army consisting of 30,000 people followed the Earl of Argyle to resist England, but in the end only more than 1,000 cavalry returned to Edinburgh with the Earl of Argyle at this time in Pink Canyon. The Duke of Somerset and the Earl of Wellington worked hard to hunt down the defeated Scottish soldiers. In fact, when the Duke and the Earl of Wellington were supported together, it was like the last straw that broke the camel's back, and the Scottish soldiers' will to fight was completely destroyed. It is no exaggeration to say that, except for the fact that the Duke was able to kill and wound a few Scots at the beginning, the rest of the time was spent recruiting those Scottish captives who surrendered in the end. Even the Earl of Warwick, who had just delivered food, joined the battle with his old and sick logistics. Duke Edward watched hurriedly as the Scots were captured one by one, and were bound hands and feet by the English soldiers at will, but they could only tremble, and most of them had no sense of resistance. After an hour of such boring time, "The whole Pink Canyon is gone, my dear Lord Wellington. How many of our lads are left now?" Looking at the messy battlefield in front of him, the severed limbs and plasma of various people were mixed together, and there were eagles and vultures in groups hovering in the sky. It was a rare sunny day, but His Excellency felt a bit of chill, especially those good guys from England lying on the grass and moaning. Even the Duke, who has experienced countless wars, still has a faint touch in his cold heart. The Earl of Wellington was talking to the priests in the army. Hearing the question from the Duke, he thought for a while and said, "Your Excellency, the Duke, according to the statistics of the priests, our army killed 1,563 people and injured 3,216 people, including 2,429 minor injuries and 780 serious injuries. 7 people, and our knights heroically sacrificed 28 people. Their bravery astonished me. No way." In this Middle Ages, the group of people with the highest level of knowledge were the priests of the church, and even the nobles of the ruling class. Most of them could only write their own names. To be precise, more than 2,000 people died in this war. In this era of bloodletting to treat diseases, those seriously injured soldiers were almost dead. God bless us with this victory. It was a pleasant war. "Tell me, my count, what are our trophies?" Duke Edward skipped the sad numbers and asked about the pleasant ones. The nearby knights seemed to have heard the sound here, and most of them gathered around and listened with pricked ears. Seeing that Duke Edward had no intention of driving people away, Earl Wellington spoke up boldly. There are only a few accurate figures that can be obtained so far. In total, we have captured 2 standard cannons, 1 mutant cannon, 2 standard heavy cannons, 1 speeding cannon, and more than 2,000 Scotch ponies. There are more than 50,000 pounds of food, and 500 barrels of fine wine. As for how many Scottish soldiers were captured, I'm sorry, my lord, due to the large number, we don't know the exact number yet. We estimated that there are probably more than 10,000 people. Long live! Long live! The knights around Duke Edward could no longer restrain their heartless joy, forgetting their physical fatigue, and shouted loudly soon. The nearby soldiers saw the knights shouting happily, even if they didn't know the reason. Seeing the happy expressions of the knights, they also shouted together immediately. The Pink Canyon reverberated with countless shouts of long live, which lasted for a long time. Scotland, Edinburgh. Only 5-year-old Queen Mary is staying with her mother. Queen Mary, happily playing with her maids. Around her tender neck was a crimson velvet cloak with an ermine hem, and her long-sleeved gown of jeweled satin. The joyful skirt swayed from side to side, and her glowing red face was full of attachment to her mother. Although Queen Mary's eyes were looking at little Mary, those beautiful eyes did not focus on her. He seemed to be thinking about something, and his already pretty face became even more eye-catching. Mom, what are you doing? Little Mary looked back while playing, but her mother didn't look at her, which made her unhappy and pouted her little lips. Oh, my little Mary, I'm so sorry. Mom is thinking about something. The Queen Mother hurriedly picked up little Mary and put her on her lap. After all, this is her only heir, especially after the death of her first 2 sons. Her love for Mary really goes deep into her bones. Oh, Mom is thinking about something. Can you tell Mary about it? Mary is very smart, little Mary said in a proud tone, with an expression of coming to praise me written on her little face. Yes, my Mary is the smartest. Mom is thinking of your grandfather who is far away in France. Since Mom misses Grandpa, let's go see him. I want to go see Grandpa with you too, little Mary said in a delicate voice, and looked at Queen Mary with those dark blue eyes, with indescribable cuteness. But Mother is busy. Then, can Mary go to see Grandfather on behalf of Mother? Well, no. I want to be with my mother. Don't go to France. Little Mary thought for a while, then stared at Queen Mary seriously, and said solemnly, although Queen Mary didn't know what the consequences of the war were, she didn't want her daughter to fall into the hands of the English. Thanks, ZHH 66, book friend 1,887,429,393, Cheyenne A. Sword, Who Wants to Know, Plato's Symposium, LP 001735, Q Tung Hen, Arctic Fresh Wind, Owls Are Flying, Love the Stratosphere, 6 Kings, Rhyme, Gus, Ignorance is Not Wrong, Legolas Windrunner, Chapter 64. The final results. Okay. If Earl Allen wins the battle, you will be with your mother forever. The Queen Mother heard that little Mary was so dependent on herself, and there was a smile in the corner of her eyes. However, for some reason, Queen Mary always had an ominous premonition in her heart. When the mother and daughter were chatting happily, the Queen Mother's personal officer hurried in, with a flustered look on her face, as if she had fallen down, and there was some dust on her knees. Kathy, why are you so flustered? You have to pay attention to etiquette, you know. Her Majesty the Queen Mother is still very tolerant of Casey, the middle-aged female officer she brought from France, and she is also the person she trusts the most in Scotland. I'm sorry, Your Majesty the Empress Dowager, I'm so rude. Please forgive me. Casey knelt on the ground and acted sincerely, with a very respectful tone. Okay. Get up, and tell me what it is that makes you so flustered. Empress Dowager Mary had an ominous feeling in her heart, as if she had seen Casey's look like this once. Suddenly, her heart seemed to be poured with a basin of icy river water in the cold winter, and a chill pierced from the inside out. And Kathy said it slowly with a trembling voice as if confirming her guess. Your Majesty, the regent is back. Did he win? Queen Mary hurriedly asked, stirring her hands together unnaturally. You send Her Majesty back to sleep first. She is tired from playing. Queen Mother Mary suddenly turned her head and whispered to the young maid who was playing with little Mary. Yes, Your Majesty the Empress Dowager, the maid said softly and crisply. Little Mary seemed frightened by Queen Mary's eyes, shrank her neck, and swallowed back the words stuck in her throat. In the mood of little Mary's reluctance, she was carried back by the maid, and the conversation between the female officer Casey and Queen Mary continued. Your Majesty the Queen Mother, Lord Regent, Lord, what's the matter with him? Mary urged impatiently when she saw the female officer's hesitation. Master Regent, he just came back with more than 1,000 cavalry, and he is disheveled. Hearing this, Mary didn't know that Scotland had lost this war, and it was a disastrous defeat. She lay on the seat unbearably, staring blankly at the front, muttering uncontrollably at the corners of her mouth, "Your Majesty! Your Majesty!" The female officer, Casey, was startled by Mary's behavior, and hurried forward, calling out to Queen Mary. I don't know if it was Cathy who woke up, or because there was some concern urging her. After a while, Queen Mary came back to her senses. "It's okay. I'm okay, Cathy. I'm just surprised." Seeing the teary eyes of her personal female officer, Mary couldn't help persuading her, "Go and call the Lord Regent and the patriarchs of the other 3 families over. Come on. Don't look like you're crying. You're a lady-in-waiting of the Queen Mother of Scotland." "Yes, Your Majesty, the Queen Mother." "I'm going. You have to adjust your mood." Mary watched Cassie sprinting away from the palace with a crying voice. She couldn't help but shook her head with a wry smile. For this Casey who grew up with him, he felt helpless, and he still hasn't got rid of the crying problem since he was a child. Mary sat in a chair, thinking about how she could protect her daughter. It would be impossible to rely on those useless Scottish nobles. Boom boom boom. Half an hour later, the current regent, Lord James Hamilton, Earl of Argyll, walked in with a serious face. Mary took a closer look, and his pace was much slower than usual. The wrinkles on the face are more obvious than came Bishop David Beaton, the representative of the Scottish religion, who was also frowning at this time. It seemed that he was still quite worried about the future of Scotland. The young Archibald Campbell, the 5th Earl of Argyll, and Adolph Lennox, the Earl of Lennox, even came here without any good colors on their faces. Obviously, they all already knew the details. "Everyone. It's all my fault. I failed everyone's expectations. In front of all of you, I am here to propose to Her Majesty the Queen Mother to step down as regent. I am not worthy to shoulder this burden." The Earl, who had escaped from the long journey, was very tired. He had been on the road continuously. In less than 10 hours, the Earl's body couldn't bear it any more, and his legs trembled a little. "Lord Earl, we all have seen your contribution, and I don't think it will be any different for anyone this time, so, you should continue to assist Mary in managing Scotland. Of course, Queen Mary forbids the Earl to leave now. She is not ready to take over yet. Can't be cheaper than others." "Yes. Your Excellency, the Earl is the most suitable for this position. You can't resign." Earl Argyll and Earl Lennox said in unison, seeming to support Earl Allen. In fact, after Scotland's defeat, no one would take the big pit of regent, especially the negotiations with the English. No matter who is the regent, they will definitely sign those treaties that betray the interests of Scotland. This big black pot is really too big. Bishop Beaton still didn't speak, and stayed quietly. "Hey. Since all the ministers and His Majesty the Empress Dowager support me, then I will reluctantly continue to hold the post. But, Mr. Earl, my Mary cannot marry that sick bastard in England," said Queen Mary suddenly. Edward, who was lying on the grass reading a book, suddenly yawned, and he couldn't help feeling depressed. "Who is scolding me again?" Earl Allen shook his head with a wry smile, understanding what they meant, but finally agreed. After all, he was the person who knew Scotland best in Pink Canyon. After a night of statistics, Earl Wellington came to Duke Edward with a pair of bloodshot eyes. Duke Edward was sitting on a rock at this moment, watching the new strings of captives appearing in front of him. "My count. How did these people come here?" Seeing Duke Edward pointing at the captives, Earl Wellington said with a smile, "Your Excellency, it's funny to say that the hundreds of cavalry sent to chase the Scots yesterday, I thought they would get a few nobles. Who would have thought that there was a small wall at the mouth of the valley, which stopped a large group of Scots there? Chaos. The cavalry were like catching sheep. They worked all night and caught more than 3,000 people. The rest all ran away. Then why didn't you inform us, Your Excellency? Do you think that group of common people can be as smart as our nobles?" The Earl smiled disdainfully, and the contempt in his tone was clear. "And how many of those Scottish savages have we captured in all?" Duke Edward is still more concerned about his record. "Respected Lord Duke, so far, we have captured a total of 14,680 people. This is an unprecedented record, thanks to Earl Cadwyn, Lancaster coup, Prussian nobleman, Cheyenne sword, LP 001735, DK, Phi Ian, Q Tang Heng, Silent Defetti, Little White Veteran, Owls Can Fly, Love the Stratosphere, Bitter Wine and Turbid Wine, specialized in eating books, rhyme, best man, Gus. Finally, thanks. Let's pull down my Dakin is dead. Rhyme 2 big rewards. Chapter 65 Soldiers approach Huntington. Gentlemen, do you have any other suggestions? Just to get rid of those savage Englishmen, Queen Mary nervously asked all the ministers present, I think with Edinburgh's strength, it should be able to hold for half a year, and we can use this time to ask our allies, the French, to help us resist the English. Looking at the speechless crowd, Earl Allen could only make his own opinion known. My Lord Count, although the French are our allies, she is also a fierce tiger. Introducing a tiger into the house can scare the hungry wolves that have broken in, but it is easy to let him in, but it is difficult to let him out. Bishop Bitton, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke up, and still held an opposing attitude, which aroused other people's thinking. My monsieur, I think it's a good idea. I don't know what the Earls of Argyll and Lennox think. This. Earl Argyll didn't expect that the fire would be brought to him, and he was a little at a loss for a moment. Oh. You are young after all. You don't have much experience. Immediately, everyone present sighed in unison. He looked at Queen Mary, then at Earl Allen, and finally settled on Earl Allen. Currently, Earl Allen has more experience in governing. It makes sense for him to do so. Let's agree. Looking at Earl Allen's weather-beaten face, Earl Argyll still wanted to believe him in his heart. I also agree with Earl Allen's proposal. It's a good idea. With Earl Argyll's consent, Earl Lennox also agreed smoothly, leaving Bishop Eaton alone to oppose. Since most people agree, let's go find the French ambassador. I don't know if the bishop has any objections. Earl Allen made a final conclusion, then turned his head and asked Bishop Eaton, who had returned to silence, in a gentle tone. Hearing the Earl's words, Bishop Eaton opened his eyelids. His face was neither sad nor happy, and his cloudy eyes were full of helplessness. Obviously, he, who has always been friendly to England, was excluded by others. Nothing. The bishop's voice was very low. Then let's send someone to invite the French ambassador, Mr. Marshal Oyster. At this time, the English army, which had been repaired overnight, was about to start its journey again. As soon as the troops set off, Duke Edward summoned the Earl of Wellington. My dear Earl of Wellington, how many cavalry do you have now, my lord? Now I still have 920 heavy cavalry capable of fighting normally, and more than 1,500 light cavalry. Okay. Mr. Earl, I have an important task for you. I want you to lead your light cavalry directly to the city of Huntingdon, 50 miles away. Lord Duke Edward said with a heavy tone. His face showed the importance he attached to him. But, Your Excellency, we are all cavalry. It's because you are cavalry that you are asked to capture Huntingdon City. Duke Edward said directly to him, his tone full of doubts. The Scots now are like a pack of wolves who have lost their wolf, and even a group of sheep can bully them. Their regent, Earl Allen, is like a wolf that has lost its courage, and now Huntingdon is a male wolf without a leader. As long as you scare it, he will be at your mercy. So, I will give you the credit this time, my Earl. Okay. My horse hasn't finished riding yet. I'll go right away. Earl Wellington couldn't help being excited when he heard Edward say this. Duke Edward had just finished a breakfast cooked by the chef brought from home. He was not used to the black bread in the barracks. For nobles, he wanted to be different from common people. His Excellency the Duke yawned softly, lifted the curtain of the tent, and saw a burst of dust rushing into the distance, and the entire barracks suddenly looked messy. Hey, little guy. What's the matter? Duke Edward asked curiously, with a very approachable tone. This was the guard next to him, a young man with brown hair. Just like in China, those who can serve as guards next to senior generals are not ordinary people, and ordinary people do not have that qualification. Take Duke Edward as an example. Those who can be arranged by his side are basically the heirs of those nobles who have no right of inheritance. But now, at the level of difficulty in childbirth among the English aristocracy, most of them are from knight families, and there are also big gentlemen or big businessmen in some places. Theoretically speaking, these people are preparing for nobles, and they are also the ruling class of England in the future, and they are also his bodyguards. There is no reason for Duke Edward's tone to be mild. My lord. This is the Earl of Wellington leading the cavalry out of the barracks. The guard bowed his head to explain. He looked polite and full of aristocratic demeanor. Duke Edward liked this kind of aristocratic demeanor, which is a manifestation of their superiority. The Earl of Wellington led the cavalry to Huntingdon like lightning. Huntingdon in Scotland is like York City in England. It is a large base for Scotland to resist the invasion of England, so it also built a city wall. So under normal circumstances, it is a foolish thing to use cavalry to attack a city. The Earl of Wellington ran hard for 30 miles, and finally came to the city of Huntingdon. The city wall of Huntingdon is 30 feet high, and there is a moat in front of the city gate, and the moat is 20 feet wide under the Earl's observation. This is not an ordinary difficulty for a medieval army. The Earl was riding on a horse, Observing the scene on the city wall of Huntington from a distance, I saw that the army that was supposed to be in full battle was running around in a panic at this time, and there were only a handful of archers who were the main force defending the city, and more importantly, the Earl could only see more than 100 heads surging on a section of the city wall on the frontal battlefield. Ha ha ha. God bless. It seems that the Scottish army has wiped out all of them in Pink Canyon. I will take the credit this time, Earl Wellington was thinking silently in his heart, but the corners of his mouth turned up inadvertently, his right hand kept stroking his two shiny black beards, and his eyes narrowed. Find someone who can speak Scots, and shout for them to surrender. Yes, Lord Earl. The orderly at the side bowed his head and responded soon. A very wretched-looking guy came to the Scot with his head poking his head. He seemed to have measured the distance and stopped about 300 steps away from the city wall. Brothers on the city wall. Your Lord Regent has been captured by us. You should surrender. We came here because your Majesty the Queen is going to marry our great Majesty Edward, and we will be a family from now on. Surrender quickly. Otherwise our 30,000 army will crush you. Huntington. Thanks, LXA, Minhang Menghua, Jinhao Eugen, Earl Cadwin, Prussian nobleman, LP 001735, Lancaster Coup, Gynecological Warm Man, Book Friend 119090 XXXX11, Miwankia Nio, Shine 1 2018, Rest Assured 2 copies, DK, Fengayan, North Pole New Wind, Bring Down My Great Kin Is It. Major General Wang, Best Man, Adorable Hang Hang, Legolas Windrunner, Gwis, Beishi Coke, NRPHF5, Red Tea House, Rhyme. Chapter 66. We promise not to take a wool. Brothers in the city. You are not selling your life to someone. Our English army needs you too. As long as you surrender to us, there will be countless beauties and gold. We will be a family in the future. If you resist now, your queen will not spare you in the future. As long as you surrender to us, we will not take a single wool from you. If you resist, we will let you know what massacre is. Earl Wellington stood in the distance, watching the somewhat wretched soldier shouting loudly. Because of the distance, he didn't hear the wretched man's words of persuasion, but he looked carefully. The soldiers at the top of the city were whispering to each other. It was very lively. After careful inducement and coercion by the wretched man, the raised suspension bridge was lowered by the Scots in less than half an hour. Soon, an old man in his 50s came out from the suspension bridge. He was well dressed, his snow-white hair and beard were combed cleanly, and he looked very energetic. Dozens of soldiers came out behind him pushing several carts of sacks. And most of these dozens of soldiers are old, weak, sick and disabled, ranging from 13-year-old dolls to 40 or 50-year-old old men. They wear the skins of soldiers and don't look like soldiers. Seeing an old man and dozens of old, weak, sick and disabled, the cautious Earl of Wellington boldly brought more than 100 guards to the city gate. My lord, I am Tesla Bestlucka, a member of the Huntington Presbyterian Church. On behalf of the residents of Huntington, I would like to welcome Your Excellency the General, Mr. Tesla is so polite. You really understand the righteousness. These are some gold coins prepared by the residents of Huntington for the generals and warriors, to reward all the guests who came from afar. You are so polite. I am the Earl of Wellington, the commander-in-chief of this army, Mr. Trust's tone was very cautious and respectful, and he pointed to the carts of cloth bags behind him with both hands. Earl Wellington couldn't help shrinking his eyeballs, tilting his neck, and looked at the carts of sacks behind him. I just hope that the Earl will keep his promise. These are some of our respects. We will send the rest in a few days when we raise them. Here is 5,000 francs worth 5,000 pounds. Because most of them are Ajo and River, it seems very burdensome. Can rule the roost in Scotland. Because of the long-term alliance between Scotland and France, there are many French currencies in the territory, and Scotland does not have the same centralized minting power as England. The currency system in the territory is extremely chaotic, and the silver content cannot be set at that time. 100 copper coins were equivalent to 1 franc silver coin, called River, and the value was 1 pound of silver. The large silver coin Ajo with a denomination of 3 francs and the gold coin Pister with a denomination of 10 francs are commonly used currencies. Among them, there are also currencies such as Shuangaju, Half Pister and Double Pister. Because of the relatively high silver content and the strength of the country, French currency was widely used by Europa merchants. Don't be so troublesome, Mr. Congressman, we will go get it ourselves. Earl Wellington hastily declined, seeming a little sorry. But Lord Earl, didn't you promise not to take a single wool from us, really? When did I say that? Someone must have misrepresented it. Seeing that the old man's face suddenly turned pale, as miserable as the white snow in winter, the Earl's words took another turn, and he said softly, "However, since someone has passed it on like this, and everyone believes that I said it, then I will keep this promise. Thank you so much. Dear Earl, may God bless you, Mr. Tesla was nervous and excited at the same time, and his body was a bit overwhelmed. Okay. Mr. Congressman, hurry up and ask all the residents to come out. What? The old man was in disbelief. Mr. Counselor, I promise I won't take a single wool of yours, so all you Huntingtonites come out. We won't hurt you, but sir, you have to tell those citizens that you can't bring a copper coin out, or you will bear the consequences. Seeing Earl Wellington's determined expression and his unquestionable tone, the MP still kept his words in his stomach. People under the eaves have to bow their heads. Looking at the frightened soldiers behind him, he knew that he had no right to bargain. In desperation, the old congressman had no choice but to go back and inform the citizens in Huntington. Fortunately, Mr. Trust's prestige is quite high. In less than 2 hours, more than 10,000 citizens in the entire Huntington city left their homes, and the whole family came outside the city trembling with their families' boys. Be careful, don't smash other people's things, don't touch the noble mansion, and the most important thing is don't take a will from others. Do you know, Mr. Earl said loudly to the officers behind him, emphasizing his order. Follow your instructions, my Lord Earl. The officers were very happy to have this opportunity to make a fortune, and their voices were extraordinarily powerful. According to Earl Wellington's plan, all the light cavalry and heavy cavalry went to search, leaving more than 400 knights with him to guard the citizens of Huntington, and the searchers must leave 7 floors of the finances obtained, 4 of which belonged to the Earl of Wellington and the knights, and the other 3 belonged to Duke Edward. The soldiers rushed into Huntington with the gates wide open like a pack of wolves rushing Scotland, Edinburgh, and Leinster Palace. The 4 ministers and the Queen Mother were all gathered together, waiting for the French ambassador Marchard. Wiser, just when everyone was waiting impatiently, a muscular figure came over, with a pot-bellied figure, a tall body, and sparse hair. This was the first impression he gave to everyone. The French ambassador, Baron Marshal Voisin. The palace guard sang loudly, "Good morning, Your Majesty the Empress Dowager, the Lord Regent, and all my lords." Yes, Queen Mary and the ministers have been discussing how to defend the capital of Edinburgh before the arrival of French reinforcements. Good morning, Ambassador. I think you already know our situation. Queen Mary's words were full of arrogance. Her father and brother were both ministers valued by the King of France, and her family was deeply rooted in France. It can be said that apart from the French royal family, only their guy's family is the most powerful. Yes, Your Majesty the Queen Mother, I deeply sympathize with what happened to your country. Then, if you don't know us as an ally, how can your country help? Queen Mary's words were very direct, asking questions sentence by sentence, without any scruples about his status as an ambassador. I have sent someone to notify His Majesty the King of Paris in the middle of the night. I think His Majesty the King will definitely send reinforcements. At present, your country only needs to hold on until the reinforcements arrive. Thanks, Lee. 4,565,645,654, voter, Youngshink, Prussian aristocrat, LP 001735, Jinhao Eugen, XG Jason, Q Tang Heng, Love the Stratosphere, Book Friend 1,373,498,682, 56-legged Brother Mao, you are so slow to update, Legacy Windwalker, Nanguang is dirty. Chapter 67. I never know when your country's reinforcements will arrive, Queen Mary continued to ask mercilessly. Her rosy face had turned pale, and there was some sweat on her smooth and white forehead, which showed how anxious she was. It depends on how Our Majesty the King decides. The Lord Regent and several other ministers who were listening carefully to the conversation at the side were immediately disappointed and sighed uncontrollably. However, I still think you and your ministers will drive away those hateful Englishmen. God bless Scotland, Marchard. Baron Voisin has a sincere look on his face, giving people the impression that what he said is from the heart, and you should believe him for your kind words. I think God bless Scotland. After hearing these comforting words, Queen Mary finally felt better, and the expression on her face seemed to soften a lot. After the French ambassador left, the faces of everyone in the palace remained as serious and heavy as before. Your Majesty, I think it's better to use Her Majesty the Queen's home Abbey. There is a place where the light of the Lord shines, and it is relatively hidden. It is not easy for the English to find it. Mahome Abbey is located by the sea not far from Edinburgh, A monastery hidden in the mountains, and Edinburgh is a port city, so there are many ships near the port, and it is a convenient thing to leave Scotland from there. Queen Mary is very safe to stay there, yes. In order not to fall into the hands of the English, and not to marry that sick English bastard, it's okay to be wronged a little, Queen Mary said through gritted teeth. Obviously what she said was quite different from what she thought in her heart. Since Her Majesty the Queen Mother has approved it, it is better to send the Queen to Maho Monastery immediately today, Earl Alan said with a serious face, with a sense of sternness and fashion, and everyone present felt that the former high-spirited regent had returned. Okay. I'll arrange it right away. Queen Mary promised Honourable Her Majesty the Queen Mother, and all the ministers, through this war, I feel that our Scotland cannot beat the English, so? What do you mean? Seeing Earl Alan belittle her side, Queen Mary couldn't help interjecting, I think that only the French can defeat the English at present, so I propose that Her Majesty the Queen marry the French Crown Prince Francois, so that our relationship with France will be stronger. In this way, our Scotland will remain peaceful forever. Seeing the Earl's ups and downs speech, the whole person looked very excited. It seemed that he was very excited by the defeat of this war, regardless of what everyone was thinking. The regent, Earl Alan, who was speaking, was very excited. He was so excited that he thought of a good idea immediately. Everyone looked at Queen Mary. After all, she had the most say in this matter. Okay. Yes. The marriage between Mary and Crown Prince Francois can be agreed. For the sake of Scotland, I think Mary is willing. In fact, Queen Mary is willing for her daughter to return to France to receive education, especially since her father and brother are both powerful officials in France and have high positions, and marrying the French prince, she thought it was the best choice for Mary. Queen Mary put Queen Mary in the position of a victim again, and won the sympathy of the Scots for Queen Mary. This removes many obstacles for her future pro-government with the consent of the regent and the Queen Mother. The rest of the people could only agree at this time. In Huntingdon City, after half a day of looting, the cavalrymen returned to the camp happily, each with a few big bags, and the expressions on their faces were happier than those of married wives seeing the cavalry returning with a full load. Earl Wellington and the many knights also grinned one by one, with smiles that could not be hidden at this time. The old MP who was staying aside felt uncomfortable, and more than 10,000 citizens also watched with tears in how the cavalry slowly moved out of the city gate. Dear Mr. Congressman, you can inform the citizens to return to the city. Mr. Earl's words at this time, in Mr. Tesla's heart, are like rain watering a dry wheat field, but it is alms given by the devil with tears in their eyes. Mr. Congressman and citizens returned to their homes that seemed to be washed by water. The cavalry were somewhat conscientious, and finally gave the citizens some comfort by not taking their food. The Earl of Wellington returned to the camp with the knights. They said it was a camp, but it was actually an open space surrounded by a wooden fence. The Earl stared at the littered knights from time to time to count the income of the cavalry. In fact, it is very simple, because the cavalry are all valuable things, so those copper and silver coins and rarer gold coins are distributed according to weight, and those antiques, porcelain, for tea, etc., the knights simply said a number, and then gave it a value of 3 layers. Anyway, those cavalry didn't know the real value, so the knights exploited them at will for the sake of money. The knights played at a speed of 200%. In less than an hour, under the calculations of the 30 knights, all the goods were basically processed, my lord. After calculation, we can get silver coins worth about £30,000 this time, and there are about 1,000 antiques worth tens of thousands of pounds, but it is difficult to convert them into pounds. Hearing the knight beside him say the number in a surprised tone, the Earl also showed a happy smile. Combining the £5,000 sent that time, we have harvested a total of £35,000 this time, as well as antiques worth tens of thousands. What a good harvest time. This time, more than 400 of you knights, each go to get £10 worth of silver coins, and then hand over £15,000 to His Excellency Duke Edward, and help me clean up the rest. Yes, Earl. The knight agreed without blinking an eye. The knight who reported to the Earl was a knight of the Wellington family. He had been loyal to the Wellington family for generations, and was trusted by the Earl of Wellington. Choose some precious ones from the remaining antiques. The rest will be handed over to the Duke of Somerset in my name, as a thank you for his gift. Yes. After hearing this, the knight left to complete the task ordered by the Count. 3 days passed in a flash. On this day, in the early morning, the Earl of Wellington, who was soundly asleep, was awakened by his attendants and got up to welcome the arrival of Duke Edward. Standing outside the camp, the Earl felt the ground shaking, and there was a boom, boom, and thick smoke rushing towards him not far away. The Earl knew that this was Duke Edward leading the remaining English troops, and there were more than 10,000 Scottish prisoners soon. The Earl saw the figure of Duke Edward, and the Duke also saw the Earl of Wellington, so he galloped forward, thanks to XG Jason, Quis, LP 001735, Lancaster Coup, the Silent Fay, the Cure Tang Heng, the Graffiti TTY, the Earl of Cadwin, the great kin who brought me down is dead, the heart of killing the sword. The 56-legged brother Mao, Pen Ink Stone and Ting Feng, DK, Phi Ian, Minheng Dream Talk, Legolas Windwalker, Asong, Rhyme thank you for pulling me down, my great kin is dead, a big reward. Chapter 68 Mother and Daughter Dialogue. Duke Edward quickly rode a tall horse to Earl Wellington's side, covered in dust. Good morning, dear Mr. Duke. Earl Wellington saluted fluently, with a smile on his face. Good morning. Earl Wellington, seeing you look so good, you must have captured Huntington. Looking at the smiling Mr. Earl, Duke Edward couldn't help but guess you are so smart. My lord, Huntington has taken it, and our gate to Edinburgh has been smooth since then. Yes. Earl Wellington, let's set off now. I can't wait to see the city walls of Edinburgh. The Duke of Somerset was finally happy at this time, and his whole person seemed to exude a different kind of charm. I am afraid that this is why he attracted the crowd who followed him. Follow your instructions, my lord the great Duke. The Earl slapped his ass in a very playful way, which made Duke Edward laugh out loud afterwards. The cavalry who had rested for 3 days mounted their mounts one after another, and almost everyone had large packages hanging on their horses, which slowed down the walking speed of the horses below them. An army of nearly 30,000 rushed towards Edinburgh, and the whole ground was shaking all the time. People who didn't know thought it was an earthquake at this time. In Edinburgh, Linlithgow Palace, in the bedroom of Queen Mary, the mother and daughter were looking at each other. My little Mary, listen to your mother, go to Moorhome Monastery with Aunt Casey for a while, and my mother will pick you up in a while, okay? Empress Dowager Mary lowered her body in desperation to persuade her daughter in front of her. In order to talk to her better, she squatted in front of her. The red skirt tightly wrapped her body, and her butt looked like 2 huge footballs from behind. It was full of temptation for all men, but unfortunately no one appreciated it. No. I won't. I want to be with my mother. Little Mary twisted her head arrogantly. Her lovely long golden hair grew to her waist, more than half a foot in length, and her round face was tense. The eyeballs are round and round, and the whole person looks extraordinarily cute. It's really urgent this time, my little queen. My mother will definitely play with you non-stop when you come back this time. Seeing her daughter's angry and cute appearance, Queen Mary also felt very embarrassed, and couldn't help pursing her red sexy lips. HMPH. Mother is lying. Do you think I don't know that the English are calling? Little Mary pouted, raised her chin, and looked as if she had fully grasped the situation. Who told you? After hearing this sentence, the Queen Mother's face suddenly became a little ugly. Mom. It has spread throughout the palace, and everyone knows about it. Little Mary spoke in an exaggerated tone, and in order to express herself clearly, she even drew a big circle with her tender hands, never maintaining her aloof image. Really? Does Mary love her mother? The Queen Mother relaxed when she heard that someone had not intentionally passed it on to little Mary. Of course. Mary loves Mama the most. I love Mama more than I do, little Mary said softly. Her hands unconsciously hugged the Queen Mother's arm, and shook her arm from time to time. Her whole body was almost hung on Queen Mary's body. Then, since Mary loves Mommy, can Mary do Mommy a little favor? Of course. At that time, Mother, you can just say it. Mary will definitely do it for you. Little Mary spoke in a delicate tone, and patted her small chest with her small hands, speaking with confidence for being able to help her mother. Mary looked very happy, with 2 dimples on her smiling face. Okay. Then Mary goes to Moorhome Monastery to help Mother pray to God. Okay. Queen Mary is like a wolf grandmother inducing Little Red Riding Hood, carefully making traps step by step. Well, alright. I'll just help Mom this time, and I'll have 3 days when I come back. No. I won't have classes for 5 days, and I'll play every day. Little Mary is still too young, and she doesn't know how to explore. After thinking about it, he agreed. On the 2nd day after little Mary was sent to Moorhome Abbey, Duke Edward led an army of more than 30,000 people to the walls of Edinburgh. Looking at the city in front of him, Duke Edward couldn't help but sigh with emotion. This is the place where he made great achievements and where he rose to prominence. The height of Edinburgh's city wall is as high as 40 feet. Edinburgh is built of stone, and the stone wall has the function of preventing fire and resisting attacks from bows and arrows and other projectile weapons. Down. Climb up the steep city wall. The defenders at the top of the wall can shoot arrows down or throw objects to attack the attackers. The besiegers are thus completely exposed to the open space, and compared to the defenders who have the advantages of strong protection and shooting downwards, the besiegers are quite disadvantaged when shooting upwards. The city wall is densely covered with arrow towers, which makes people feel numb under normal circumstances. The arrow towers are built on the corners or walls of the city, and are set up at regular intervals as strongholds. The arrow tower will protrude from the flat city wall, so that the defenders in the arrow tower can shoot outwards along the direction the city wall faces. The arrow training at the corner of the city allows the defender to expand the attack surface and shoot from different angles in order to highlight the high advantage of the city wall. A moat was excavated at the bottom of Edinburgh's city wall to surround the entire castle, and the moat was filled with flowing water as much as possible to form a moat. The Earl of Wellington, who had never seen Edinburgh, took a big breath after seeing it. It seemed that it was much stronger than the walls of London, especially the wide and deep moat, with black and smelly foam. If you fall down, you will die or be disabled. There are also the tall city walls and the many arrow towers. Just looking at it makes people feel numb. Now it's the Scottish captives who come into play. Duke Edward seemed to have expected this situation. He waved his hand and spoke with pride. The Earl of Wellington showed admiration. This is true. No wonder Duke Edward has been taking tens of thousands of Scottish prisoners, so he still keeps this hand. At this time, in Edinburgh, the regent, Earl Alan, urgently mobilized the private soldiers of various noble families, as well as the Highland soldiers who had followed his orders and failed to catch up with the expedition. Of course, there were also citizens and free citizens of the entire city, who were all recruited by him and walked up the city wall together at this critical moment. The people of Edinburgh, sticking to their common interests, united by the regent's side and erupted with astonishing strength. In a word, this is the autumn of life and death. Edinburgh, which originally had only 3,000 troops, has grown to nearly 10,000 after emergency mobilization. This has reached its limit for a city with a population of only 20,000 citizens. As long as you kill 20 people, you can be knighted, and slaves and serfs can become freemen. The Lord Regent dragged his exhausted body, and shouted loudly, which seemed to be exhausted, "Thanks, Longongian, Estak, you are so slow to update, Goddess, Prussian nobleman, Lily 599, Little White Veteran, Owl is flying, Q Tang Heng, Silent to Fei, let me down, the great Qin dynasty is dead, love the stratosphere, Estak, ignorance is not wrong, Legolas Windwalker, favorite left-handed, Zia Ofa e-bookstore, Walker, Pen Inkstone and Tingfeng, Lancaster Ku, Minheng Dream Talk, thank you for pulling it down. My great kin is dead, a big reward if you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World. It means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69 Deadlock. As long as the English are repulsed, the House and I will personally issue a decree for you. The bravest among them will be personally received by Her Majesty the Queen Mother, and will be made a knight with 3 villages as fiefdoms. Earl Alan's words inspired the Scots' desire to resist England. In a word, they inspired their subjective initiative. Before the Earl could finish speaking, a messenger came to him. My Lord Regent, the English have arrived. Hearing this, Earl Alan immediately called an army of citizens and freemen to the city wall, and started a defensive battle with his soldiers back to the English army in front of the city of Edinburgh. Inside the main camp, there are densely packed tents. Most of the soldiers are standing or squatting, and some are talking and laughing. They look leisurely and have no intention of fighting at all, and the Scottish prisoners of war, who randomly used fences as protection beside the main camp, under the urging of the elite English cavalry, walked out of the simple camp one by one, walking around listlessly as captives. The Scots had not only been on the road for several days, but also had only one meal of black bread a day, and sometimes they were driven to walk without a single piece of bread. They had no strength to walk one by one. You savages, by God's blessing, our Lord Duke Edward will give you a chance to be free. Gavin knew this fat man. He was the leader of the Highland warriors who specially guarded himself and him, a greedy and vicious guy. Even though Gavin looked down on this fat man, he had to listen carefully to his words, because this fat man could dispose of him as a prisoner at will. Even if he killed him, no one would care. All of you, As long as you fill up that stinking ditch and come back alive, the 100 people who work the hardest will be free and go home." Tens of thousands of people suddenly fell silent, and less than 10 seconds later, the scene erupted with mind-boggling shouts as a result. Tens of thousands of Scottish Highlanders were forced to march towards the walls of Edinburgh. Gavin, like the warriors of his own tribe, struggled to hold a sack of dirt, and followed a big man holding a big rock in front of him slowly towards the moat. His stomach that hadn't eaten all day was growling non-stop along the way. It was 3 miles from the camp to the moat, plus dozens of pounds of dirt. Gavin felt that his thigh was not his own, and every step he took felt a piercing pain. Seeing the moat, Gavin quickly threw the sack in his hand before looking back around. In a short distance of 3 miles, Edinburgh shot thousands of arrows, and nearly 300 soldiers fell down due to lack of physical strength. More than 100 people fell to the ground, screaming miserably on the battlefield where the intestines were flowing and the blood was everywhere, and the calls for help could be heard endlessly. However, a landfill of tens of thousands of people, in this black city ditch. Not even a shadow can be seen in this way. After more than a dozen consecutive landfills, the moat formed a mile-long hard ground, a bridge through which the army could pass. The tens of thousands of sharp arrows shot by the Scots took the lives of nearly 5,000 people, and more than 3,000 seriously injured. The Scottish prisoners suffered heavy casualties. At this time, the hostility in the hearts of the captives had reached a critical point, but Duke Edward sent a large amount of black bread at this time, directly suppressing the dissatisfaction of the Scots. In fact, when Gavin ate the bread in front of him, there was only a feeling of happiness in his heart. After being hungry for almost 2 days, his shriveled stomach finally bulged. After his stomach was barely half full, Gavin was free to look at the fat man who had just arrived, and the Scottish captives who were just as hungry and thirsty as him. While Highland warriors, everyone knows why I came here. The fat man looked at the Highland warriors with big eyes, even though he knew they would not dare to touch him, but his size, which was larger than the average Englishman, was still a threat. After the Duke's instructions, "Go to Wells, these people are free, but you can't go to Edinburgh. Do you understand?" "Yes, yes, yes, my lord." The one with the most flexible mind quickly nodded and bowed, echoing loudly. Seeing more than 100 people return to his home, Gavin couldn't help feeling longing in his heart. "Don't be discouraged," the Duke said. "As long as any of you can climb the city wall, he will be free." Looking at the remaining 5,000 captives, the fat man said without haste. Immediately, the cheers of the strong Highland soldiers became more enthusiastic. The next day, the Highland warriors carried a long ladder and rushed up the city wall of Edinburgh. Gavin was one of them. He was the second to climb the city wall, with a sturdy body leading the way in front of him. Almost all the falling stones on the city wall were blocked by him with his shield, and Gavin was not injured. When Gavin climbed onto the city wall without any risk, he saw the sturdy soldier kneeling on the ground, surrendering his weapons to the militiamen holding long guns. However, the militiamen who did meritorious deeds could not let him go, and stabbed him with a gun while his head was bared. The poor guy went to see God before he could see clearly. Before Gavin had time to remind him, the soldier was bleeding all over the ground. Gavin hurriedly prepared to climb down the wooden ladder, but the archers on the arrow tower had already aimed at him. WH! 3 arrows shot straight into Gavin's chest. Before Gavin could react, his body fell uncontrollably under the city wall. His body was bloody, lying on the corpse. He felt pain all over his body. His breathing became more and more difficult, and he stopped breathing slowly. In this way, after a month of attack, only more than 300 Scottish prisoners returned to their homes with injuries. While Edinburgh was still impenetrable, the English infantry also killed and injured more than 3,000 people, forcing the Duke to stop the siege and switch to siege Edinburgh itself as a port. And for a month, ships aided by the French came and went. Is what little Edward said true? Duke Edward couldn't help thinking about Edward's letter. "My home monastery, a monastery that has always been quiet, has many uninvited guests at this time. Grandma. Where is Queen Mary?" Harry was very polite to the oldest nun in the convent. "No. Do you know that men are not allowed to enter the monastery?" "Grandma, I won't go in." "I'm interrupting you this time." Harry spoke politely to the old nun, but gestured to a dozen strong women behind him. So, a dozen women entered the monastery one by one, and the old nun could only watch them go in. The dozen old nuns behind her also looked helpless. After all, they are only women, and they are still old women, so they are powerless against this group of people. The ferocious woman came to a remote courtyard, opened the door, and saw a beautiful girl of 4 or 5 years old playing happily with a maid in her 30s. "Thanks, NRPHF5, Prussian nobleman," Book Friend 1,815,162,023, XG Jason, Jinhao Eugen, LP 001735, Book Friend 1,371,498,682, DK, Phi Ian, W00753, Graffiti TTY, Stardust, Bring Down My Great Kin is Dead, Book Friend 1,887,429,393, Lianga Exchanger, Legolas Windwalker, 0212, Tai Chi Hall, Miwankia Nio, Gujin Kanglin, Love Stratosphere, 56-legged Mao Jen, Pen Inkstone and Listening to the Wind, Looking Up to Huanghua, Speechless of Fei. Walker, Book Friends 160,414,092,341,539, Richito, Apprentice Knight Luo Zia Pang, Chapter 70 The Queen in Number 039, S. Arrival. In the early morning, a carriage from Scotland was driving fast on the narrow and muddy road. Dozens of armored knights slowed down and walked slowly around the carriage. Hey! Why is the Queen of Scots so quiet today? It's not normal. A knight couldn't help the doubts in his heart. Looking at the gorgeous carriage that was driving peacefully, he asked his companions in a low voice. In the past 8 days, she has cried all the way and made trouble all the way. She is almost at Windsor Castle. Even if she is only 5 years old, she knows that she will not be able to return to Scotland. Even the knight, who has always been a stable character, can't help the turmoil these days. Yes. If I didn't see her as our future queen, I wouldn't bother to take care of her. Don't talk nonsense. This is our duty, understand? The steady knight stopped him, and said in a warning tone in the carriage protected by the knights, Her Majesty Queen Mary of Scotland was sitting on the cushion of the carriage, looking at Cassie, who was sent by her mother to take care of her, with tears in her eyes. Little Mary, don't cry any more, let's be good together, shall we? Looking at the red and swollen eyes of little Mary, Kathy couldn't help but feel distressed in her heart. She had witnessed how Mary grew up from a baby to the present. Casey, who has never had children, regards Mary as her own daughter, and she plays with Mary when the Queen Mother is busy. But I miss my mother. I don't want to leave my mother, and I don't want to go to England. I don't even want to marry the King of England called Love. Little Mary rubbed her red and swollen eyes, puffed her pink cheeks, and said to Casey coquettishly, But this was decided by your father before. You can't go back on your word, and your mother will come to see you every year. Mary has grown up and can't cry anymore. When Kathy saw the group of ferocious women, she knew that they were not from Scotland, and the visitors were not good. Sure enough, after she escorted little Mary out of the monastery, she saw soldiers in English clothes staring closely at little Mary behind her. Knowing that everything was irreversible, she took the initiative to lie to little Mary, saying that she was going to marry the King of England. Therefore, she kept comforting the crying little Mary along the way, and she knew that how she and little Mary would live in the following days would all depend on the sick and frail King of England. Edward VI. Up, Your Majesty. Your fiancée, Mary Queen of Scots, is arriving today. You are still reading here. In order to welcome the future Queen of England, Luna has been busy cleaning up Windsor Castle all day long, almost never stopping. But His Majesty the King has been reading a book, and has no intention of preparing for his future wife. Okay. Got it, I'll be here right away, after I finish reading this page. Edward heard the urging from his butler Luna, and couldn't help perfunctory. My lord, the knight who brought the message said an hour ago that your fiancé is only 3 hours away. Maybe even less. Come on. Lucy, bring His Majesty the King's clothes, and I will help His Majesty King get dressed. But Luna had already expected that Edward would say this, and ordered Lucy, who was holding the clothes beside her. Oh, my butler, you are such a good housekeeper. Edward put down the book in his hand helplessly, and got up from the seat so that Luna could help him get dressed. Hello. Your Majesty, you are about to meet your fiancé, aren't you excited? Luna and Lucy helped Edward wear the cumbersome king's costume together. Seeing Edward's unlovable appearance, Lucy interrupted and asked, What's there to be excited about? A 5-year-old girl knows how to cry all day long, Edward said indifferently, but in fact, there was an unspeakable excitement in his heart. This is the biggest change in the course of history since his rebirth in the past few years. This achievement, as well as a sense of superiority as a time traveler, almost burst his heart. There is another internet buzzword. How to say, Lolly has 3 good things: soft voice, soft body, easy to push down. Blah blah blah. How can I, the majestic king of a country, have such obscene thoughts? This is my future wife. I will push it sooner or later. Don't worry. Thinking about something in his heart, The clothes on his body were quickly changed, and a majestic little king appeared in the room. Then Edward started his frenzy of reading again. Luna and Lucy let him see this, and they went to check the cleaning of the castle. Time passed unconsciously in Edward's reading. Your Majesty. Her Majesty the Queen of Scotland has arrived at the castle. A petite and lovely maid came and spoke softly beside Edward. Okay. You lead the way. Edward finally came to his senses, and his little wife had arrived at the door. Edward and the little maid walked one step at a time, and soon they arrived at the hall covered with red carpets and flowers. Edward's arrival made everyone in the hall turn their attention to him, which made him a little uncomfortable. Welcome, lovely Miss Mary, and Miss Cathy. Edward took a closer look, and saw little Lolly holding the hand of a woman dressed as a maid in her 30s, looking around timidly, her little eyes full of anxiety. Hearing Edward's voice, little Lolly looked at Edward, staring at him pitifully, as if thinking about his identity. Are you the King of England? Little Lolita's voice was a little naive. Yes. My brother will take you to see the fish, okay? Edward's voice was full of temptation, as if watching fish is a very fun thing. Little Mary turned her head to look at Casey beside her, and after receiving her nod, she hurriedly held Edward's hand, eager to go to see the fish. On the third day after little Mary disappeared, Queen Mary in Edinburgh knew that her daughter had been taken away by the English trash. You are all a bunch of trash. Even your queen can't stand it. I want you to be of no use. A dog will look after the house. The Empress Dowager Mary was furious at this moment, and only her daughter was in her mind. The normally gentle and virtuous Empress Dowager showed a scary sight in front of her subordinates. She was like a lioness who had lost her cub, exuding a dangerous aura all over her body. Your Majesty. We didn't expect the English to reach the top of the mountain through the path. We stay at the bottom of the mountain and don't know anything. It's all our fault. Please punish us. The head of the palace guard knelt on one leg, his face full of remorse. Okay. You go down. You will be exempted from half a year's salary and the post of head of the bodyguard. Now I will temporarily take the post of head of bodyguard. I am also responsible for this matter. Queen Mary, who had vented her anger, knew that the matter was irreversible. France brought a loyal knight, and Queen Mary didn't want to punish him too much. Thanks, apprentice knight Luo Xiaopang, Jin Yu Yu Jin, Xiangayan, Xiuxi Banzhu, Prussian nobleman. Book friend 1,675,833,771, 7.5 wolves, LP 001735, graffiti TTY, silent to Fey, dragon tooth blood, favorite left-hander, 56 brother leg hair, red tea house, Gujin Kanglin, the great kin who pulled me down is dead, Lamentmo, AI stratosphere, Earl Cadwin, King Wu Morning, XG Jason especially thanks to Deccan, who brought me down, is dead, for the big reward. Chapter 71 The Scottish Parliament. In the English barracks 3 miles outside Edinburgh, except for the necessary guards, most of the soldiers fell asleep, while the main leading generals of England gathered in the main tent of Duke Edward and started a happy time. Many generals sat around a long table, and a white candle was placed at intervals on the long table. Under the light of the candle, the shiny foie gras and delicious cheese were on the table. Of course, how can men get together without wine? The good French wine is held by the maid serving the table with both hands, pouring it into the empty wine glass from time to time. Gentlemen, we are happily gathered here today to celebrate the end of this war, and we are only one step away from victory. Lord Duke Edward raised his wine glass and gestured towards the army generals sitting there. The generals stood up quickly and raised their wine glasses. Even the coach, Duke Edward, stood up. How could their subordinates be rude? This cup, let us pay tribute to His Majesty Edward. We are able to achieve such a victory only with his blessing. After finishing speaking, Duke Edward took a sip of the special wine in the wide wine glass, and the red woman's liquid passed through the Duke's throat and ran into his stomach. Seeing this, the generals who got up also took a sip of the red liquid in their hands. This glass, let us toast a glass of wine to the young man who has made great contributions this time. Harry, he made our great king come true and brought back a queen to our England. Leaving this sentence, the atmosphere off the field suddenly became active. Haha. Harry, I didn't expect you to have such a hand. Very good. Looking at the somewhat shy Harry, Baron Agile couldn't help but patted him on the shoulder, praising him. Thank you for your compliment, Uncle Agile. Besides, how can my credit be compared to yours? Harry knew that the relationship between Baron Agile and the Wellington family had always been very good, so he was very polite to the Baron. The dialogue between the two seemed very small in this lively scene. Without a single ripple, His Excellency the Duke pressed the button, and the heated discussions gradually quieted down. After all, It is indeed surprising that His Majesty the King has a fiancée. Ladies and gentlemen, let's stop discussing matters related to His Majesty the King. My second glass of wine is for everyone sitting here, especially the Earls of Warwick and Wellington. You two are England's greatest contributors." Edward looked at the Earl of Warwick and the Earl of Wellington. His words were full of gratitude. People who don't understand think this is a scene of handsome and harmonious people, but it's a pity that the people who can sit here are all good people. So why don't they understand the personal relationship in it? My lord, you are being polite. Who doesn't know that you are England's greatest hero? The Earl of Warwick did not speak, but smiled stiffly. Seeing this, the Earl of Wellington spoke first. "You can't say that, it's all God's blessing. That's why we won today." Duke Edward got bored, pretended nothing happened, and walked away along the steps. "Also, gentlemen, I will return to London in 3 days, and the task of besieging Edinburgh will be handed over to the Earl of Wellington and you all." Although His Excellency the Duke has just said it now, the generals are not surprised. It has already been known to everyone. After all, the Duke's bodyguard battalion has been packing up, and the blind can see it. "Don't worry, Your Excellency, as long as the Scots don't sign the merger agreement, I will swear to surround Edinburgh and prevent anyone from passing me." Earl Wellington patted his chest and assured loudly, with indescribable seriousness and boldness in his words, "I believe in you, Monsieur Earl. I don't think you will let me down." "Then, let's do whatever you want next. I wish you all a good time." His Excellency the Duke clapped his hands, and a row of scantily clad girls walked in gracefully. The generals also laughed heartily. It seemed that they were quite satisfied with Duke Edward's arrangement, but Duke Edward walked out of the tent, leaving everyone to enjoy the drunk time. A pleasant banquet continued until the second day, and the mess and moaning in it were not humane. The next day, September 25, 1547, the House of Commons in Edinburgh, Scotland. In fact, just like England has a parliament, Scotland also has a house, but the English house is a tame dog of the king, while the Scottish house is a restored wild dog, which is an institution that effectively restricts the king's power. However, the two countries are the same at this time. The House of Lords is in power, and because of Scotland's backwardness, the power of the nobles has become stronger. And it has completely controlled the House of Representatives. Men and gentlemen, this is the merger agreement sent by the English. At this moment of life and death for Scotland, it is up to you to decide. Because of the many days of patrolling and inspection, Earl Alan looked very tired and haggard, and his voice was weak, and the members behind him could hardly hear what he said. Even though it was already known that the English had sent a treaty merging Scotland and England, the nobles present did not understand it in detail, so they circulated it one after another. Half an hour later, the more than 200 noble councillors present took a quick glance, but even so, the anger of the nobles rose like boiling water. "Those bloody Southerners, hypocritical liars, they don't deserve to come to Scotland. Scotland belongs to us Scots, and no one can take away our ownership of this land. For freedom, we fear nothing." The congressmen were furious, cursing the English people desperately, and kept chanting slogans. "Be quiet, gentlemen. Next we start voting. Please calm down. I also know that everyone is very uncomfortable, but this is a necessary process of the House. Please be quiet." Baron Ross, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, was wrinkled and raised his beard. After emphasizing it several times, he persuaded the excited nobles to come down. This shows that everyone is dissatisfied with this agreement. "Gentlemen, let me tell you some good news. His Majesty King Henry VIII of France has agreed to send troops, and will increase his assistance to us in the future." Earl Alan interjected at the right time, which ignited the enthusiasm of the congressmen again, and the cheers continued for a long time. "Okay gentlemen, let's start voting." Baron Ross waited until the sound ended before he began to speak. The waiters in the parliament gave the parchments to the eager nobles, and the lively parliamentary proposal finally started the voting session. After 2 hours of statistics, where Baron Ross was speaking, he looked at the parchment in his hand and read it carefully. "Thanks, XG Jason, Lee, Su Fen, Apprentice Knight Luo Zia Pang, Jingbo, Prussian Nobleman, Lancaster Longbow, Legolas Windwalker, Menseo Manjiang, the Cat Through Time and Space, LP 001735, Gwis, The Night is Still Dark, The Silent Fei, The Cure Tang Heng, DK, Phi Ian, Estak, Minhang Menghua, Oak Duke, 56-Legged Maoj, GFJNFG, Select will thanks to Rhyme for the big reward. Chapter 72 Fishing. Cough. Cough. Gentlemen, I will now announce the results of this proposal. Baron Ross reminded the MPs who were still talking, glanced at them with presbyopic eyes, and then continued to read aloud. A total of 258 people participated in the vote for this proposal, which is in line with the bill voted by the House of Representatives. Among them, 149 people voted against, 90 people voted in favor, and 19 people abstained from voting. Because more than half of the people opposed, after reading this, Baron Ross looked at the joyful nobles in front of him, and read aloud, "So, now I declare that this parliamentary proposal on the merger agreement is vetoed, and no one or organization is allowed to sign this bill, signed without legal significance, read by Chipperfield Ross, the 25th of September, 1547. After the speaker read out the decree, the nobles could no longer control the excitement in their hearts, and hugged the familiar nobles around them. After all, England has besieged the city of Edinburgh for a month, which is a scene that has never been seen in hundreds of years. Even though food came in continuously from the sea, the nobles and citizens in the city couldn't help but feel desperate. Your Majesty, there is news from the House of Representatives that the English motion has been rejected. The Scots have decided to stick with the English, the young maid hurried in, her tone full of joy. As Queen Mary's maid, she knew that Queen Mary had been paying attention to this matter at this time. Queen Mary was drinking black tea with various condiments, taking small sips, her movements full of aristocratic elegance. "Emily, don't panic. Talk slowly," Queen Mary said very calmly, parting her red lips. Queen Mary actually did not want England and Scotland to merge. Although she, as the mother of Queen Mary, would not be in any danger, but rights were also missed for her. Moreover, she married with the expectations of her father and brother and the request of the French royal family to maintain the alliance between Scotland and France and to hold back the English. "Yes, Your Majesty," the Queen Mother, Emily said softly. "I have to say here that the word Your Majesty could usually be used to refer to the King and Queen in the 16th century. At that time, it was not until the Elizabeth period that it slowly evolved into the proper title of the King. Okay, you go down." After listening to the maid's words, Queen Mary slowly cracked a smile, and the mature woman's style could be seen at a glance, and her full breasts were trembling, as if they were about to overflow. At the same time, there were many sighs and laughter in Edinburgh. After Windsor, there is a pond about half a mile in circumference. By the pond, sitting behind a stake, are two teenagers and a little lolly wearing wreaths. The two sat in front, holding a fishing rod tightly in each hand, but Edward's was bigger, while Mary's was smaller. Behind them were two maids, Lucy and Casey, who were staring nervously at the water in front of them, not daring to blink. The same is true for little Mary, with her little hands tightly grasping the small fishing rod, her round eyes staring at her own fishing rod, her pink face tensed, her little lips pursed, full of seriousness, looking very cute. And her beloved colored skirts were all dragged on the ground, stained with a little mud and grass, but she didn't notice it at all. But Edward touched his palm casually with the fishing rod, lying on the deck chair he instructed the carpenter to make, squinting his eyes, enjoying the rare sunny day in England. "Ah, there are fish, little fish." "Brother Edward," in a daze, Edward heard an exclamation and a voice calling himself. Gently opened his eyes. Under the sunlight, only half of the eyelids were open, and this was enough for Edward to see what was going on. "I saw little Lolita bouncing around in the back. Lucy and Casey in front were holding his fishing rod and pulling back non-stop, sweating profusely from exhaustion." Only then did Edward realize that his fishing rod had caught a big fish, and he fell asleep without realizing it. "Brother Edward, why are you asleep? Come on, we caught a big fish, and we can eat fish today." "La la la." Little Mary saw Edward, opened his eyes, shook Edward's arm happily, pouted her little lips, and looked at Edward reproachfully. After a while, it seemed that Lucy and Kathy's movements became more intense, and little Mary's attention turned to the front again. "Sister Lucy, Aunt Casey, come on. Be sure to bring up the little fish. No, bring up the big fish." Little Mary clenched her fists tightly, her face flushed red, and she kept muttering non-stop. Her tender body seemed to be full of strength at this moment. "I'm here. Let me help you." Edward rolled up his long sleeves, revealing his thin and tender arms. "Okay. Brother Edward, come and catch fish." Little Mary clapped her hands happily. Her little face was as red as a little apple, and she wanted to take a bite just looking at it. After Edward heard the words, he stepped on the green grass, pulled the end of the fishing rod, and pulled it back vigorously. His feet pressed against the slippery mud on the shore, and he fell back with his own weight and strength. Edward also swayed from side to side from time to time, in order to exhaust the strength of this big fish. In fact, this fish was beyond Edward's expectations. Even with Edward added, the three of them struggled for nearly 10 minutes before they stopped. "Come on. Follow my slogan and mention it together. Edward saw that the movement of the fishing rod became smaller and smaller, and he knew that this confrontation should come to an end. Pick up. Pick up. Pick up. Edward called out hastily, and Lucy and Casey in front also lifted the fishing rod in cooperation. Bang! A big fish that was more than a foot long was thrown on the grass, flapping its tail from time to time, trying to get back into the water. Wow! There's a big fish! There's a big fish! Seeing the fish thrown on the ground, little Mary ran over in a hurry, cheering and jumping for joy. Edinburgh, English barracks, Duke Edward sitting in a chair, listening to a message from a messenger. My Lord Duke. My master informs you that the Regent, Earl Alan, has very cunningly handed over your proposal to the House of Representatives, and you also know that the nobles are hostile to you in the English army. Not many people welcome you like my master. As the messenger spoke, he did not forget to praise his master. In the end, the proposal was rejected by the House of Representatives. My master would like to ask you, do you have any other reminders? The messenger looked at Duke Edward carefully and spoke softly. I know, I have already expected this matter. Let your master stop being active. Be careful to hide also. I think His Majesty the King will know about his contribution to our England. Duke Edward touched his two mustaches with his left hand, and said in a thick voice after the messenger left. Earl Wellington couldn't help asking, Your Excellency, are you still going back to London as planned? Of course, the reform of the holy religion must continue. Thanks, none by the cat that travels through time and space. W00173, Youngshink, Lancaster Coup, Prussian nobleman, book friend 1,149,903,684, Gus, Tokyo Sakura, D. Ross, 56-legged brother Mao, ZR Jarui, Minheng Dream Talk, DK, Fi Ian, Speechless Afei, Bring It Down, My Great Kin is Dead, Eating Too Much Salt is Bad, Illegal 10 Rule, I Take Care of You, Cute Heng Hen. Hello China, Jiangjan, Morning Sai, Love Stratosphere, LP001735 Alice, to this day, thank you all book friends for your support. I especially remember that I asked for recommendation tickets every day. Now I have to thank book friends for 10 minutes every day. Now I just want to thank everyone, like many old book friends. My input method: as soon as the first word is typed, the rest will come out. Thank you for your support. Chapter 73 Enclosure Movement. Master Faris, it is really a pleasure to be welcomed by you, my Lord Duke. You have made such great contributions to England, it is only natural for me to welcome you. The Duke of Somerset had just returned to London today, and was about to go to the Privy Council to deal with the matters, when he saw Faris Alexander, the Minister of the Privy Council, standing in front of the Privy Council, welcoming him. Faris Alexander was born as a commoner. After studying at Oxford University, he was promoted by Henry VIII to the Privy Council as secretary. He is very capable of learning, and he is also very beautiful in doing things. It just so happens that Henry VIII is also a person who loves learning, so he quickly became a hot political star in the Privy Council. When Henry VIII died, he was already the Speaker of the Privy Council and also the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he was one of the leaders of the Privy Council. How to say? The Privy Council in the Tudor period was equivalent to the cabinet of the Ming Dynasty at that time. It had legislative power, executive power, and judicial, diplomatic, military and other rights. It can be said that during Henry VIII's period, he was the most powerful English government agency. What we need to make clear is that the Privy Council is just a general term, just like our State Council, under which there are various committees to exercise power. For example, the Treasury Department, the Keeper of the Seal, the Secretary of State, etc., and so on. The more ridiculous point is that the cabinet that will appear in the UK in the future is now just a small institution of the Privy Council. In the 15th century, a committee of the Privy Council had the power to sentence prisoners to any punishment below the death penalty without evidence. During Henry VIII's reign, he could even declare laws to come into effect only by consulting the Privy Council. Without the consent of Parliament, the Parliament of England did not regain control of legislation until after the death of Henry VIII, and fully grasped the legislative power. Since the Royal Privy Council still assumed considerable legislative and judicial responsibilities, it became a very important administrative institution. However, the large number of members of the Privy Council, such as in 1553, had a total of 40 members, making it difficult for it to play its due advisory role. Of course, this is also the strategy of the King of England. And this powerful government agency cannot be allowed to be fully controlled by one person. The two walked into the office of the Privy Council. Various secretaries were busy coming and going, and those ministers also signed with quill pens from time to time. The entire Privy Council seemed extraordinarily noisy and busy then. "My lord the Duke, does he know what you are doing in the Privy Council today?" Sitting in his seat, Ferris curiously asked Duke Edward, who came here after all. Important matters are generally discussed at the Regency Council, and the Duke would not normally come to the Privy Council. "My Chancellor of the Exchequer, before we get down to business, let me tell you one thing." "Okay. Tell me, I will listen carefully." Ferris agreed casually. "On the way back, I saw with my own eyes a group of refugees in ragged clothes walking aimlessly along the road. Among them are wailing babies, as well as elderly people who can't walk. Their eyes are full of sadness and despair of life." "So, Your Excellency, how do you say they became like this?" Duke Edward stared at Ferris, speaking deeply and seriously. He looked like a hungry wild wolf, and Ferris, who was stared at, shivered all over his body. "I think it might be that they are too lazy." This led to wandering. Ferris's voice was a little weak, without his usual full of energy. I'm afraid he himself didn't quite believe it. In fact, the entire English society at that time had always held a contemptuous attitude towards begging homeless people, and believed that homeless people were lazy people in the countryside. It is ridiculous that this view has become the mainstream view of society. Your Excellency, in your position, would you believe this is the reason? Duke Edward smiled contemptuously. "This? I think it's about the same." Ferris hesitated in his words. "Your Excellency, let me be straightforward. These are mainly caused by local gentlemen and nobles enclosing land." Duke Edward mercilessly pierced through the mist that covered up the facts, his tone full of hardness. "So?" Ferris asked with some guesswork, his thick eyebrows twitching. "So I came here today because of the matter of restricting the enclosure, and I hope to get your support." Duke Edward occupies the moral high ground, spitting directly at Ferris. "But, Your Excellency, the local gentlemen and nobles are all potential opponents," Ferris explained weakly, as if reminding Duke Edward of great resistance. "Don't worry. Your Excellency, this matter has already been supported by Bishop Thomas. I think the local priests will definitely support us." Duke Edward's tone was full of confidence, and he also said something that reassured Ferris. "Besides, we can be regarded as carrying out the will of the former king. There is nothing to criticize." The Duke of Edward seemed to still feel Ferris' uneasiness, and used Henry VIII as a shield to try to eliminate his uneasiness. Before the rise of the British market economy, the village community was in the form of lords owning land, farmers renting land. This form was established by convention and formed the de facto long-term fixed use of land by tenants. However, with the rise of the market economy, this old lease contract has been impacted by the highest bidder wins. Some people, such as those who want to raise sheep, are willing to pay more land rent, and the landlord is also willing to rent it to them. But the original tenants refused to agree, so they were violently driven out. The so-called bloody violence of sheep-eating people is only applicable to this kind of enclosure that breaks the lease. Of course, whether the scope and degree of violence are as serious as we usually talk about is another matter. In medieval Europe, the open ground system prevailed in the vast plains stretching from England in the west, to the Ural Mountains in the east, to the Pyrenees and the Alps in the south, and to Denmark and southern Sweden in the north. The so-called open land system originated from the land form of rural communes. After the annual harvest, the fields of the manor owner, the church, and the farmer's allotment are routinely removed from their respective fences, etc., and opened up as public pastures. The public land other than the open land is called the owner of the manor, and it is actually owned by the farmers. The dispersal of fields brings a lot of inconvenience to farmers' cultivation and management. The enclosure movement is that the gentlemen and nobles took back the land that originally belonged to the collective in name, but in fact it was the land of the peasants and they represent the collective. Just like in ancient China, it was said that the whole world is the land of the king. All the land belongs to the emperor in name, but is this possible in fact? So they can use the name to drive away the farmers who cultivate the land openly and fence the land and declare that these lands are theirs, and no one can cultivate them. Thanks, on the feasibility of completing the homework, Jingbo, Earl Cadwin, Book Friend 1,887,429,393, Prussian nobleman, Gus, Legolas Windrunner, LP 001735, W00753, Lamentmo, I am not 2116. Let me down. Dokken is dead, loves the stratosphere, specializes in eating books. Fei Yazhang, the cat who travels through time and space, best man, and the speechless of Fei. Thank you again for the great reward of Dokken who pulled me down. Chapter 74 Uprising. Chester, the capital of Cheshire in northwest England, is located at the junction of northwest England and Wales. The River Dee, flows through the city and echoes with the artificial canal, adding to Chester's richer cultural and historical atmosphere. Before the rise of Liverpool, it was a well-known commercial place with a population of tens of thousands. It can be said that geographical factors accounted for the majority. Chester was built in the Roman period, 79 AD, when it was built by the Romans as a military fortress to defend against Welsh attacks in the south of the city. Today, the four main roads running through the city centre of Chester still retain the style of nearly 2,000 years ago. It was the most prosperous port in the 13th to 14th centuries. After the silting of the estuary of the Dee River and the rise of Liverpool, it declined. After the railway was opened in the 19th century, it became a commercial centre again. At this time, Liverpool has not risen for a long time, and Chester still retains the last glorious moment. Chester Cathedral, located in the city of Chester, is the main church of the Church of England in Chester. Formerly known as St. Werburgh Abbey, the church is dedicated to Christ Jesus and the Virgin Mary. It has been the bishop and pilgrimage centre of Chester since 1541, as well as the administrative, festive and musical centre of the city of Chester and its diocese. Therefore, almost all the time, the church is crowded with pilgrims from all over the world who come to admire the grace of the Lord. At this time, compared with a lively church hall in front of the church, in the luxurious tea house behind the church, which is specially used for priests to rest, almost all the priests who are free gather here, and there are even a few local knights and gentlemen. Everyone sat on chairs with serious faces, pretending to be listening. Almost no one dared to speak, let alone make any loud movements. Most of the more than 20 priests wearing white cassocks are old, and only a few young people are dressed, but without exception, their faces are full of kindness, with a look of show mercy to the world. However, there was a bald old man standing among the people sitting around. With a majestic expression on his face, he could be seen as the Bishop of Chester Cathedral. It is precisely because of the prosperity of Chester that the popularity of the church has been exuberant, which has led to the abnormal plumpness of the church staff and their shiny faces. Bishop Brown was born into a baronial family. Sadly, he was not the eldest son, so he was sent by his father to become a minor monk in the Catholic Church since he was a child. Although the rule that Catholics cannot marry is difficult to deal with, he has many illegitimate children, and in Chester and Cheshire, his power and status are among the top few. This in turn contributed to his loyalty to Catholicism. Servants of the Lord, today I tell you all the reasons why you are here. And today, I believe that in order to spread the blessings of the Lord, all of us will definitely do whatever we can to spread the word again to the lambs of the Lord. Gospel of the Lord. Bishop Brown spoke with great force, and his snow-white beard trembled with a movement of his lips. Matched with a Mediterranean-like top of his head, he looked very happy, but the faces of everyone sitting there became more serious. My Lord Bishop is right. In recent years, believers have converted to the cult spread by heretics almost every month. And just yesterday, 30 believers turned their backs on our Lord. An old man with a long beard on the side also chimed in and chatted about the situation of his church. His face was full of anger, and his saliva was splashing freely. More than that, recently some heretics who betrayed our Lord openly hugged women on the street, and what's more, there was a priest who even sent out invitations to invite guests to his wedding. Gentlemen, what do you say will make those lambs think of us shepherds? And what qualifications do these heretics have to replace our Lord to shepherd those Lord's lambs? Seeing the old priest speaking angrily, a young priest didn't know if he felt the same way. Speaking in a righteous tone, those heretics who falsify our Lord's words are not worthy of spreading faith in our Lord, nor are they worthy of shepherding the Lord's lamb. We should launch a jihad, defend the faith of our Lord, and punish those heretics. Bishop Brown didn't say anything, but the youngest priest, Priest Crew, shouted loudly and danced with hands, his pimple-covered face flushed. Bishop Brown knew Priest Crew, who also came from a baronial noble family. And he, who just turned 19 this year, was pushed by his father to take charge of a small church, and last month, the Duke of Somerset of London's chapel was stripped and dissolved after proposals pushed by the Duke of Somerset passed. Naturally, his position was lost, and he returned to the original point. Even the money his father bought was not recovered. Obviously, the business lost money. Therefore, Bishop Brown understood the mood of Priest Crew, so he acquiesced to his words and regarded him as the front row. However, Priest Crew's words broke the originally lively atmosphere, and the scene was suddenly silent. Even the old priest who had been complaining was silent. Apparently, everyone sitting here didn't think about the jihad hundreds of years ago. After all, it was a gamble with their lives. I quite agree with Priest Crew's views. Now it's time to die. servants of the Lord. What else do you have to worry about? With the blessing of the Lord, we have nothing to fear. Looking at the group of people with fear, especially the priests he was optimistic about, he knew that he had to be encouraged. I believe that in order to defend the Lord's faith, the 8,000 believers in Chester will definitely support us. Bishop Brown threw out the Catholic believers in Chester, and sure enough, everyone's faces improved a lot. He knew that he had to impress the representatives of these places, so that he could launch a fatal blow to those who believed in heresy. Moreover, our respected Lord Raleigh David also agrees with us about maintaining the Lord's faith. He said that the militiamen in Cheshire will remain silent. Raleigh David is the Sheriff of Cheshire, that is, the county lieutenant. In order to take care of everyone's sense of reading, let's call him the Sheriff. As the official force with the largest military power in Cheshire, his statement almost confirmed the greatest guarantee for the priest's victory this time. At that time, these magistrates represented the king locally, so they had a standing army of close to 300 to 500 people, which was the greatest guarantee for local stability. My Lord Bishop, in order to safeguard the glory of the Lord, I think it is inevitable to launch a holy war. Yes, Your Excellency, even if I sacrifice my life, I will let the glory of the Lord shine on the whole of England. After everyone expressed their willingness to launch a jihad, Bishop Brown narrowed his eyes and said loudly, "Gentlemen, for the sake of the Lord, let us unite and defeat heresy. Down with heresy. Down with heresy." Thanks, young Shine. The owl is flying. Jingbo, 56-legged brother Mao, 7.5 wolves, Legolas Windrunner, Q Tang Heng, Jinhao Yujin, Prussian nobleman, Guis, LP 001735, I care about you Lao Jer, the silent hooligan, 1937 warlord, Z bored around, love the stratosphere, ignorance is not wrong, book friends 150,501,213,545,468, book friends 1,815,162,023, Lancaster Coup, specialize in eating books, Major General Wenguo, book friends 1,071,090,710, Panan Zai Shi, Express Zinfeng, Minhang Menghua, Brother Long Long, Blue Sky Black Eagle, Hu people, bring down my great kin is dead, Chapter 75 Undercurrents raging. The discussion ended with Bishop Brown's opinion as the target of action, and everyone dispersed immediately as a result. In Chester, the busy city citizens and the tired farmers who were busy with their lives did not realize at all what kind of intense undercurrent was brewing under this quiet and peaceful life. D village, a village named after the River D. Due to the irrigation of the river, the entire village has nearly 500 people. In the Middle Ages, it was already a large village, and it became a knight's fief. Knight Paul Bard is the person with the highest status and the highest prestige in D village, not only because he owns nearly 800 acres of land in the entire village, but also nearly 1,500 acres of mountain forests. The most important thing is that most of the villagers live by renting his land. What surprised the villagers was that the knight, who always liked to ride his BMW early in the morning, did not appear, which was beyond the expectations of the villagers. After all, it is really confusing that something that has become a habit suddenly does not happen one day. At this time, the lively living room of Nightbud's house was tightly closed. A few robust servants were guarding the door of the living room, their eyes wide open, as if they were going to eat people. Master Bud was sitting on a chair with a serious face, pretending to be listening, but some gray hair revealed his age. Respected Night Bard, in order to maintain the glory of the Lord, we need you to join us. What is your wish? The young priest crew talked a lot, just to convince the middle-aged knight in front of him that he was a famous knight near Chester. According to rumors, Night Bard has respected the guidance of the Bible all his life and worked hard to become a perfect knight, so he has been respected by farmers in several nearby villages. Moreover, his reputation for being stingy is also widely spread. It is said that he only likes to ride a horse for a walk every day, and has no other hobbies, so he accumulated a lot of wealth, which made his reputation even more widespread. Mr. Priest, I am extremely honored to defend the glory of the Lord. If you have any needs, please tell me, Nightbud said boldly. Not at all as stingy as rumored outside. We hope that you can participate in this action to protect the glory of the Lord, and come together to save the lambs of the Lord. Upon hearing Nightbard's directness, Priest Crew was full of joy and couldn't wait to say, "Oh, no way, I'm getting old, and now it's hard for me to walk, let alone take part in actions. Why don't you put my name on it? Let me participate in this battle of faith." Nightbud pretended to be in pain, and thumped his strong arm, his face full of helplessness. "Old fox, You only think about the benefits and don't pay at all. What a good plan. Priest Crew clenched his fists calmly, but there was still a smile on his face. Well, in order to show my devotion to the Lord, I can contribute £10 to this operation. No, £50. With a pained look on his face, Nightbud said to the young manservant beside him. Yes, master. The young manservant responded respectfully. In this case, then I will interrupt. Goodbye, dear Bard Knight. Hearing this, the young priest Crew took the £50 he had received and the title bestowed by the Knight of Bard, and said goodbye through gritted teeth. In this way, the whole of Cheshire is full of priests of various colours who come and go, linking up the power of the people from all over the place. On October 16, 1547, in a small church in Chester, the capital of Cheshire, dozens of young priests and hundreds of fanatical Catholics gathered in the sealed church, slowly silent with believers of the Lord. The Duke of Somerset in London is a heretic. He betrayed the Supreme Lord and shamefully surrendered to those hateful heretics. We can't count on those gentlemen in London. It is up to us to uphold the glory of the Lord. Don't be afraid, we are born with original sin, and this action can wash away our sins from our bodies. We will be watched by the Lord in the sky, and we will ascend to heaven after we die, and enjoy the extremely pleasant life in heaven, restore the glory of the Lord and destroy that group of heretics. The young priest Crew shouted loudly, his tone full of fanaticism. Destroy the heresy. Destroy the heresy. Destroy the heresy. The believers below also enthusiastically echoed, and the atmosphere at the scene was very enthusiastic. Everyone, come with me, let us destroy the heretics together. Priest Crew led hundreds of people to the slums west of Chester City. The Church of the Protestant Priests from London was built in a slum, and it was a small two-story building, dilapidated, but full of Protestants who came to pray. The goal of the group of priests Crew is here, the largest gathering place for Protestants in Cheshire. One of Cheshire's biggest massacres and uprisings was ignited here. Meanwhile, in London at this time, since Wilson Ferris, co-signed by Duke Edward and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, signed the decree restricting land enclosures, the atmosphere in London suddenly became dignified. Earl of Warwick's mansion. The front of the mansion is full of carriages of visiting gentlemen and nobles from all over the world. The neighing of horses and the chatter of grooms slowly converged into a symphony in the spacious reception room of the Earl's mansion. The visiting guests were densely packed at this time, and there were not even enough seats, and many people were standing. The people waiting in the hall seemed to have found someone they knew well, chatting with each other, and the noisy voices flowed casually. Valorous knight, fear of the French, my lord the Earl of Warwick, the robust male servant shouted loudly, reminding everyone in the hall that the male protagonist of the mansion had arrived. Good morning, Honorable Earl. Everyone saluted as a gentleman. Good morning, gentlemen. The Earl of Warwick also responded politely. I understand the arrival of gentlemen, but there is nothing I can do about it. This matter was initiated by the Duke of Somerset, and I have no knowledge of it. The Earl of Warwick said first that he knew that the Duke of Somerset's decree to restrict the enclosure had just been issued from the Privy Council, and the group of winners of the enclosure could not sit still immediately. Therefore, he has to pave the way for himself in advance. But Lord Earl, we went to the Duke of Somerset. He shut us up. A well-dressed middle-aged gentleman spoke first, which shows how anxious he is. Yes, my Lord Count, this decree is too sudden. You don't know how much we have lost. A thin middle-aged man also took up the conversation. The Earl of Warwick knew him. He was a well-known gentleman in Southamptonshire. He heard that his family's land was as much as tens of thousands of acres. Thanks, Fei Yazhang, Love Woolly Face Code, Graffiti TTY, Book Friend 201703160140590078. I am not 2116, Prussian nobleman, Quis, LP 001735, DK, Phi Ian, Silent to Fei, Gas, 56-legged brother Mao, love the stratosphere, Jiangjan, bring down my great kin is dead, best man, Legolas Windrunner, Mingxian, eating too much salt is not good. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.